When I was 8 years old, my parents cruelly threw me out of the house. I wandered through the night until my aunt found me and took me in. I'll never forget that night when I was only 8 years old. My harsh parents yelled at me and threw me out the house. When I attempted to force my way back in, my mother burst in wrath and hit me so hard that I staggered and fell onto the road. But what my father did next was even more shocking, something I could not have predicted. Hello, my name is Mia Anderson and I'm 23 years old. But the story does not begin today. It began 15 years ago, when I was only 8 years old. That night, I learnt that not all parents love their children equally. That night, I lost my family. I grew up in Seattle, Washington, in a house that resembled a museum rather than a home. Everything was shiny, expensive, and flawless, except for me. My parents, Jonathan and Catherine Anderson, were well-known attorneys for their discipline, brilliance, and accomplishment. In their world, there was no place for weakness, failure, or mistakes. They expected excellence in everything, particularly from their children. My younger brother, Adam, was their pride and pleasure. Adam was everything they wanted: brilliant, engaging, and naturally talented. Whenever he accomplished something, our parents showered him with love, praise, and attention. He was the golden child. And me? I was merely the additional one. They weren't sure what to do with the mistake. No matter how hard I worked, I was never good enough. If I received a B on an exam, my parents would stare at me as if I had personally embarrassed them. If Adam received an A, they would celebrate. If I needed help with my homework, they told me to do it myself. If Adam required assistance, they engaged the best tutor money could buy. They acted as if he deserved success while I deserved nothing. I spent my childhood chasing their approval, convinced that if I worked hard enough, if I tried my hardest, they would eventually notice me. Finally, they loved me in the same manner that they loved Adam. But nothing I accomplished was ever satisfactory. When I succeeded, I was invisible. When I failed, I was apparent. When I was 8 years old, things changed. It was the night I realized that no amount of effort could make them adore me. That night, they made a decision. The night they decided I didn't fit into their beautiful family. On a frigid evening, my life as I knew it came crumbling down. I had just gotten back from school, my backpack dragging heavily on my shoulders. But the weight in my chest was far heavier. That day, I took an important arithmetic test. I'd spent endless evenings studying, going over my notes over and again, thinking that this time I'd make my parents proud. Despite my best efforts, I only received a C+ in the end. I understood what that meant. As soon as I went inside the house, I could hear their voices in the living room, loud, piercing, and disappointed. My hands gripped around my test paper while I remained frozen in place, listening. "She's an embarrassment," my mother said sharply, each word piercing the air like a knife. "We have given her everything, every opportunity, and she still fails us." My father's voice followed, colder than before. "We've done our best to shape her into something worthwhile, but she keeps proving she's not meant to succeed." My gut wrenched horribly, and I felt my breath catch. They were talking about me again. "She's lazy," my father added. "No matter how much we push her, she never rises to the occasion. She is not the kind of child we can be proud of." Tears welled in my eyes, blinding my vision. I tried. I'd done everything I could and worked harder than ever. But it wasn't enough. Then my mother's voice broke the silence in a way that made my blood run cold. "We can't keep doing this. Maybe it's time for her to leave." I felt the ground beneath me shift. For a moment, I thought I misheard her. I was 8 years old. She couldn't have meant that. But she did. After supper, my parents summoned me to the living room. My father sat on the couch with his arms tightly crossed over his chest. My mother stood beside him with an unreadable expression. Adam was nowhere to be found. He never had to witness these events. "Mia, we've talked about this," my father remarked, his tone calculated and dispassionate. "You aren't meeting our expectations, and quite frankly, we're tired of trying." A shiver went down my spine. "Trying what?" My voice was barely audible, a murmur of bewilderment. My mother did not hesitate. "Trying to fix you," she stated bluntly. "If you can't live up to what we expect, then maybe you don't belong here." My breath got locked in my throat. My hands trembled by my sides. Where would I go?" I said, barely above a whisper. My father sighed, unfazed by my apprehension. "Figure it out," he said. Something within me shattered. Panic clutched at my chest. "Please," I implored, my voice faltering as tears ran down my cheeks. "I'll do better. I'll work harder. Just don't send me away." I walked closer, reaching for my mother's hand, hoping for some trace of warmth or hesitancy. Instead, she punched me. It happened so quickly that I barely had time to respond. Her punch hit my cheek, sending a ripple of anguish through my skull. My head snapped to the side, and I staggered, almost dropping to the ground. For a brief moment, the entire globe went silent. My heart hammered in my ears. My skin burned where she had smacked me, and the sting went deep into my bones. I held my cheek and trembled as I felt the painful, swollen skin. I gazed up at her, tears in my eyes, grief and betrayal etched over my face. But my mother did not even flinch. "Get out," she ordered, her tone low, harsh, and definitive. I looked to my father for some sort of protest, some indication that he disagreed with what had just occurred. But he didn't even look at me. That was it. That was when I stopped being their daughter. The moment I realized they never wanted me in the first place. The sting on my cheek grew worse while I remained there, stunned in shock. My mom had punched me. My father had allowed it to happen. And now they're throwing me away as if I'm nothing. Tears obscured my vision, but I refused to cry in front of them. Crying would not change anything. Begging would not make them adore me. They had made a decision. Without further word, I turned and dashed to my room. My hands shook as I grabbed a tiny suitcase and packed whatever clothes I could locate. I wasn't sure where I was going or what I was meant to do. I just knew I needed to leave. As I zipped up the suitcase, I paused for a second and looked around my room. The walls were blank, except for a few old sketches from my childhood. My bed, which I had slept in for years, suddenly felt unfamiliar. This house has never truly felt like home. But now I realize, it never will. With my heart thumping, I grabbed the strap of my backpack and headed toward the front door. My mother was standing in the hallway, arms crossed, looking at me with frigid contempt. My father was in his normal chair, thumbing through a newspaper as if nothing had happened. Adam was still missing. I swallowed the lump in my throat. One final chance. Maybe if I stared at them long enough, they'd see the sorrow in my eyes and alter their minds. Perhaps my mother will regret slapping me. Perhaps my father would tell me to stay. However, they didn't. My mother grabbed the doorknob and swung it open. "Leave." I went outside, hugging my bag tightly, and the cool night air sent shivers down my spine. My feet felt heavy as I walked down the stairs, and my mind begged me to turn back, to do anything, to make them want me. The door slammed closed behind me. I was alone. As I walked through the streets of Seattle, a sense of dread sank in my chest. The street lights flickered above me, sending sweeping shadows across the pavement. The sound of distant traffic, laughter from surrounding homes, and the odd barking of a dog all added to my sense of solitude. I wasn't sure where to go. I did not have a plan. I only had the clothing on my back, a swollen cheek, and a heart that seemed torn into pieces. Hours passed as I wandered aimlessly, fatigue settling into my bones. The chilly wind clawed at my skin, and the hunger in my stomach served as a harsh reminder that I hadn't eaten since dinner. I wanted to collapse on the sidewalk and give up, letting the world take me whole. Then I heard a familiar voice. I stood in the dark light of a street lamp, arms wrapped around myself in a desperate attempt to stay warm. My feet ached from walking, my stomach twisted from hunger, and the sting of my mother's hit lingered on my cheek. I felt entirely lost. The streets of Seattle stretched out before me, foreign and unwelcoming. I had nowhere to go and no idea what to do next. My parents, no, they weren't my parents anymore, had made it clear that I was no longer a part of their lives. The realization brought another flood of hopelessness smashing over me. And then, in the depths of my sorrow, I heard a voice. "Mia." I froze. My breath caught. The voice was warm, familiar, and filled with concern. I turned back, my heart thumping, and noticed a woman standing a few steps away. It was Mary. My aunt. For a minute, I was unable to move. I wasn't sure if I was hallucinating or if my fatigued mind was pulling a nasty joke on me. But as she got closer, her eyes scanned my face, taking in my injured cheek and the bag hanging over my shoulder. I realized this was true. "Oh my God, Mia? What are you doing out here?" she inquired, her voice filled with concern. I opened my lips to respond, but the words would not come. How could I describe what had just occurred? How could I tell her my mother had punched me? That my father had witnessed it and said nothing? That they'd discarded me like garbage? Mary must have noticed the agony in my eyes because, before I could even speak, she rushed up and hugged me. It was the first proper hug I had received in years. The warmth of her hug stirred something deep within me. I'd been fighting back my tears, refusing to cry, refusing to show my parents how deeply they had hurt me. But as Mary's arms wrapped around me, I shattered. A sob slipped from my lips. Then another. Before I knew it, I was crying furiously into her shoulder. She said nothing. She just held me while I cried and fell apart. When I finally pulled away, my breath caught. She tenderly caressed my face, her fingertips stroking against my injured cheek. Her eyes darkened with rage. "Did someone hurt you?" she said, her tone stern. I paused, but I could not lie. "It was my mom," I said quietly. "She hit me. And then they told me to leave." Mary inhaled quickly, her jaw clenching. For a minute, she appeared to want to march right to their house and give them a piece of her mind. Instead, she took a long breath and gently exhaled, as if forcing herself to remain calm. "Come with me," she urged, her tone softer now. "You're safe now, Mia. I promise." She held my hand, and for the first time that night I felt less alone. Mary guided me through the quiet neighborhoods, her grip hard yet pleasant. My legs ached, and my body was fatigued from the constant walking, but I didn't care. For the first time since leaving that place, I felt secure. We arrived at her apartment, a small but charming space tucked in a quiet section of town. When she unlocked the door and led me inside, I felt an overwhelming sense of warmth. Something I had never felt in my own home. There were warm blankets spread over the couch, family portraits on the walls, and the faint aroma of vanilla candles wafted through the air. "Sit down, sweetheart," Mary urged gently, directing me to the kitchen table. "You look exhausted." I obeyed, my body too exhausted to argue. I watched her walk about the kitchen, preparing a bowl of soup and pouring me a drink of water. She did not ask me 100 questions. She did not demand explanations. She simply took care of me. As she placed the bowl in front of me, I paused. My mother had never done this. Not while I was unwell. Not while I was upset. Not ever. "Eat," she spoke quietly. "And then we'll talk." My first sip of soup warmed me from the inside out. I didn't realize how hungry I was until I started eating and finished the entire bowl in minutes. Mary sat across from me, studying me intently. "Now," she replied, folding her hands together. "Tell me everything." I gulped hard, my gaze sliding to the table. "Where do I even start?" "They never wanted me," I finally admitted, my voice lifeless. "No matter what I did, it was never enough. Adam was their favorite. I was just there. A failure. A disappointment." Mary's face clouded, but she did not interrupt. "I got a C+ on a math test today," I explained. "And that was the final straw. They said I wasn't worth the effort anymore. My mom." My fingers brushed over my injured cheek, the recollection still fresh. "She hit me. Then they told me to leave." An uneasy quiet enveloped the room. When I finally looked up, Mary's face was furious. "I always knew your parents were cruel," she continued, her voice trembling. "But this is unforgivable." Tears welled up again in my eyes. But this time, I wasn't simply sad. I was also angry. How could they have done this to me? How could they sleep comfortably if they had abandoned their own daughter? Mary stretched across the table and squeezed my hand. "Listen to me, Mia. You're not a failure. You're not worthless. You are smart and strong, and you didn't deserve any of this." A lump developed in my throat. I'd spent my entire life trying to prove myself to my parents, but as I sat in Mary's warm, comfortable kitchen, I came to a realization. I did not have to prove anything to them. They'd made their choice. And now I'll make mine. I was not going back. That night, for the first time in a long time, I slept soundly. There were no quiet arguments outside my door. There is no overpowering sense of failure pushing down on my chest. Mary's corridor light cast a nice glow into the guest room, and a blanket pulled over me provided warmth. For the first time in my life, I was not simply surviving. I felt safe. Mary served me scrambled eggs and toast for breakfast the next morning. It was unusual to have someone care about me unconditionally, without expecting perfection in exchange. As I ate, she sat across from me, drinking her coffee. "You can stay here for as long as you need," she stated simply, as if it wasn't a question. I hesitated, a tinge of doubt seeping in. "I don't want to be a burden," I muttered. Mary scoffed and shook her head. "You are not a burden, Mia. You never were." Her words sank deep into my chest, releasing years of self-doubt. I had long believed that I was unwelcome. That I was not good enough. But maybe the problem was never mine. Perhaps it was them. With Mary's help, I began to rebuild my life. She assisted me in transferring to a new school where I could start over, free from the continual weight of my parents' expectations. At first, it was difficult. I still cringed at loud voices. I still felt like I needed to prove my worth to everyone around me. But Mary never made me forget my potential. "You're smart, Mia. You can do anything you set your mind to," Mom told me every day. I studied harder than ever. Not because I want approval, but because I wanted to prove to myself that I was capable. Slowly, I began to excel in school and gained confidence in my own talents. Meanwhile, my brother Adam remained inside the house, still imprisoned by our parents' crushing expectations. I scarcely spoke to him throughout those first several years, but I was concerned about him. I'd escaped. However, he was still stuck. My phone chimed one evening as I was sitting on the couch, scrolling through my school assignments. My heart almost stopped when I saw Adam's name on the screen. "Adam. Hello, could we talk?" I stared at the message, my fingers hanging above the keyboard. A part of me wanted to dismiss it, to leave that period of my life behind and never look back. But another part of me, the one that still cared despite everything, understood Adam was contacting me for a reason. I took a deep breath. "Mia, what is going on?" Little did I realize the text would signal the beginning of something I never expected, a shift that would alter everything. Adam's letter sat on my screen, shimmering in the softly lighted room. For a time, I paused. Why now? He had never reached out to me before, not when I was fighting to meet our parents' unrealistic expectations, not when I was kicked out, and not in the years following. But something told me this wasn't a regular text. I responded fast. "Yes, we can discuss. What's happening?" His reply came almost immediately. "Adam, can we meet? I need to get out of here for a while." I could sense the desperation in his words. It wasn't like Adam to sound unsure, not the golden boy, the favorite child who always got his way. But something had changed. An hour later, I met him in a quiet coffee shop near Mary's flat. When I saw him, I knew something was wrong. The confident, polished brother I recalled appeared weary. His eyes were sunken, his posture slouched, and his fingers tapped nervously on the table. He looked up as I sat down, his face hesitant and almost remorseful. "Hey." I nodded and kept my voice neutral. "Hey." We didn't speak for a while. The stillness between us was dense with unspoken words. Finally, Adam moaned and scratched his temples. "Mom and Dad are suffocating me," he said. "They won't let me do anything that doesn't fit their idea of success. I told them I wanted to go to a performing arts school, and they lost it. They said I was wasting my potential." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "I thought you wanted to follow in their footsteps. Law school, corporate success, all of that." Adam gave out a hollow laugh. "That's what they wanted. Not me." For the first time, I looked at him, not as the sibling I despised for being the favorite, but as someone who had been trapped like me. He may not have been kicked out like I was, but he had been just as confined and crushed by expectations. "I can't do this anymore, Mia," he said, his voice raspy. "I don't want to wake up every day feeling like I have to be perfect just to be worthy of their approval." I had a strong sense of recognition. I understood that feeling better than anyone else. I took a deep breath. Then I stopped hesitating. Adam looked up at me, bewilderment in his tired eyes. "You don't owe them your life," I stated firmly. "If you don't want the life they're forcing on you, then leave. Start over. You have a choice, Adam." His jaw stiffened. "It's not that easy," he remarked. "I still live under their roof. They pay for everything, school, clothes, food. If I leave, I have nothing." I slumped back in my chair, contemplating his comments. He was not mistaken. It was simpler for me because Mary had taken me in and given me another chance. Adam had no one else but me. I met his gaze. "Then come stay with me." He blinked, taken aback. "What?" "I mean it," I said. "If you really want out, then leave. I'll help you figure things out, the same way Mary helped me. You don't have to do this alone." Adam swallowed hard, his hands curling into fists against the table. For a little while, he said nothing. Then he nodded. "Okay." And just like that, everything changed. For years, I assumed Adam was the lucky one, the one they cherished and desired. But now I knew he had been stuck in the same way that I was. The difference was that I'd already broken free. Now it was his time. The tension in the air the night Adam departed our parents' house was almost unbearable. He had packed a single bag, just as I did years before. But, unlike me, he could choose to leave. He was not being tossed out. He was finally gaining control of his own life. Mary and I waited for him outside, in her car, which was parked a few homes away from our boyhood home. My gut was tight with apprehension, knowing our parents would not let him leave without a battle. But Adam was determined. He'd spent years as their perfect son, their golden child. And now, for the first time, he was selecting himself. The front door opened 15 minutes later, and Adam stepped out onto the porch. Mom and Dad were just behind him. Even from a distance, I could see the rage in their faces. Mary tightened her grip on the steering wheel. "Are you sure he's ready for this?" she wondered. I breathed slowly. "He has to be." Adam strode down the stairs, his motions rigid and strained. My father stood at the doorway, arms crossed, face twisted with barely restrained rage. "If you leave now, you will not come back," my father cautioned. Adam paused. I could practically feel his internal struggle, years of training, years of being the preferred son, the one they shaped to their liking. Leaving meant losing up all of that. But then he took another stride forwards. "Then I won't come back." My mother gave a bitter laugh. "You're making a mistake, Adam. You're nothing without us." I felt my nails drive into my palms as she said. I'd heard those identical lines before, words designed to rob us of our confidence and make us believe we were powerless without them. Adam, however, did not shy away. He returned to them for one last time. "No, Mom, I was nothing with you." And with that, he walked towards us. Mary accelerated as soon as he got inside the car, pushing away from the curb. I turned to face Adam, expecting him to display some expression of contrition. But instead, he sighed with relief. For the first time in his life, he was free. That night, Adam stayed in Mary's guest room, which had become my safe haven all those years before. He was quiet at first while processing everything. But as we sat at the kitchen table, something about him felt lighter. "I should have done this sooner," he said, staring at his hands. I gave him a slight smile. "You did it when you were ready. That's all that matters." Mary touched his shoulder. "You'll figure things out, Adam. And you don't have to do it alone." I nodded in accord. "We're in this together." For years, I believed that my family was irreparably shattered, and that I would never have a sister who genuinely understood what I had been through. But as I sat with Adam and watched his confidence begin to recover, I noticed something. Perhaps we were not broken. We were just breaking free. The days that followed seemed strange. Adam was finally out of his parents' grasp, but he was still getting used to his new situation. At first, he was quiet and reserved. He spent a long time lost in thought, contemplating what had happened. But gradually, I began to see the true guy emerge. He played his guitar more, something he had to give up due to our parents' stringent prohibitions. He began talking again about music school, songwriting, and finally doing something for himself rather than for them. It was weird to see him without the weight of their expectations on him. However, it was wonderful. We were sitting on Mary's little balcony, admiring the city lights, when Adam turned to face me. "Do you ever think about them?" he inquired tentatively. I breathed gently, my fingers stroking the mug's rim. "I used to," I confessed. "For years, I wanted them to regret what they did. I wanted them to realize their mistake, to come find me and beg for forgiveness." Adam nodded while looking down. "And now?" I considered it briefly before shaking my head. "Now, I don't care anymore." And I intended it. I had spent so much of my youth and adolescence needing something from them that they would never give me. Love, approval, or an apology. But the truth was that I didn't need it anymore. They were not part of my life. I was better off without them. Adam remained silent for a time before nodding. "I think I'm getting there too." We sat in peaceful silence, the weight of the past gradually fading into the night air. As the months passed, I immersed myself in my studies, resolved to make something of my life, not for them, but for myself. Adam began writing and recording music with a newfound freedom. For the first time, we were creating lives we truly desired. And then one day, Mary approached us with an idea that would change everything. We were sitting in the living room, laughing at one of Adam's stupid song lyrics, when she gave us a thoughtful look. "What if we did something with all of this?" she was asking. Adam lifted his eyebrow. "With my music?" "Number. With everything we've been through," she clarified. "You both know what it feels like to be rejected, to be told you're not enough. What if we created a place for kids who feel the same way?" I frowned. "What do you mean?" Mary leaned forward, eagerness in her eyes. "A community center? A place where kids and teenagers who feel lost, abandoned, or pressured by their families can come and just be themselves. No expectations. No judgment. Just support." The notion settled in my chest like a spark waiting to ignite. I remembered the kid I used to be, the child who yearned for affection, a secure haven, and someone to tell her she was enough. I envisioned what it would have been like if such a location existed back then. Adam sat up taller. We could have music programs, art classes, tutoring. A place where kids can actually do what they love without fear of being told they're wasting their time. Mary nodded. Exactly. I met Adam's stare and knew we were going to do this. We intended to make our misery significant. We were finally going to build the home we never had. Months later, what began as a notion became a reality. The Anderson Community Center, which we called after ourselves rather than our parents, gradually took shape. We got a small place, raised finances, and created something from nothing. A place where children might pursue their passions without fear, pressure, or rejection. Every time I stepped inside, I felt a strong sense of purpose. This was what I was destined to do, not prove myself to my parents or seek their favor. But just when I thought I'd left the past behind, it came calling. It happened during a calm afternoon. I was in the community center reviewing schedules when my phone rang. I hadn't seen this number in years. My stomach turned. I almost didn't respond. But then curiosity got the best of me. Hello? A crisp, familiar voice came through the line. Mia. I froze. My mother. It had been years since I'd heard her voice, but just hearing it felt my chest constrict. We need to talk, she said. I clenched my jaw. We really don't. She let out a deep sigh. Enough with the attitude, Mia. We've been patient, but this little act of rebellion has gone on long enough. I nearly laughed. Act of rebellion? Did she really believe I had established a whole new life only to spite her? What do you want? I inquired plainly. Your father and I have been thinking about the future, she said. And we believe it's time you come home. I grabbed the edge of the desk. Home. As if they hadn't discarded me like rubbish. As if she hadn't punched me in the face and declared me worthless. You're getting older, Mia, she continued. You need stability. A real career. That community center nonsense isn't going to sustain you forever. My heart pounded. She had not altered. Not even a little. I took a deep breath and kept my voice calm. Let me make something very clear to you, Mother. You are not my family. You stopped being my family the day you hit me and threw me out into the streets. Her stillness at the other end was deafening. I persisted, my voice resolute. I used to dream about this moment. About you realizing you were wrong. But now I see that you haven't changed at all. And I don't need your approval anymore. I heard a sudden intake of breath. Mia, be reasonable? No. You are reasonable, I replied. I am never coming back to you. I am never letting you have control over me again. You don't get to decide my future. I do. And I choose to live without you. Her voice became sharp. You're making a mistake. You'll regret this. I grinned, but she couldn't see it. I regret ever wanting your love in the first place. With that, I hung up. That was the moment I realized I was free. On the day of the community center's grand opening, I stood with Mary and Adam, admiring the space we had created together. A place for youngsters like us, who have been rejected, abandoned, or made to feel inadequate. Adam strummed his guitar with a slight smile on his face. Mom and Dad would hate this, he reflected. I laughed. Good. Mary wrapped her arms around both of us. You two have done something incredible. I hope you know that. I gazed around at the children passing through the doors, kids who would never have to feel as alone as we did. I didn't need my parents' love. I did not need their approval. I had something better. A family selected me. A life I created on my own terms. And for the first time in my life, I was exactly where I was supposed to be. My wife cheated with my cousin and had a baby. My family kept it secret for years, and now they want back into my life as I've found success. Please be patient with me as I explain this entire matter to my family because there is a lot of background involved. I'm a 44-year-old man who has been married for 10 years. My 41-year-old wife and I have been together for 13 years. We are content with our lives and have an 8-year-old kid as well. I have been married before though. I married at the age of 22, but regrettably, for reasons I'm still unclear, our marriage ended in divorce 3 years later. Since middle school, my ex-wife, who I'll call Amy, has been with me. We were essentially childhood lovers. We made the decision to be married as soon as we were out of college and had respectable careers. For the first few years, everything was good between us, but then, for some reason, things started to go strange. After that, I felt as though she was not interested at all, despite my best efforts to maintain the spark. A few weeks before our third wedding anniversary, she handed me divorce papers and declared she was done, despite my best efforts to win her back. My goal was to improve our marriage. She was only able to tell me that she was no longer in love with me, which was all I wanted as an explanation for why we had to break up after all this time together. I was furious, but there was nothing I could do about it. Since I had no other choice and didn't want to prolong the divorce and make her even more unhappy by making her live with me, I made the decision to proceed. Because of the limited number of shared assets we had, the process was really simple. I never saw her again after that. After the divorce was finalized, she changed towns and shut off all communication, according to a few people I spoke with. Even my relatives stopped talking to me around the time of the divorce, which was incredibly odd, but this is usual. When I was going through a really trying time, they ought to have been there for me, but instead they began to distance themselves from me. I made a concerted effort to stay in contact with them once the divorce was finalized, but I discovered that I had been blocked everywhere. I even made a few attempts to go see them, but neither my sister nor my parents ever let me in. It all struck me hard because it was so weird and I was already going through a difficult period. I couldn't even bring myself to do anything for a few years following the divorce, so I quit my work and spent a few months at home without a job. But I'm really fortunate to have friends by my side who encouraged me to attempt to move on and do better even during such trying moments. After the divorce, my friends looked after me because my family was never there for me. I ultimately made the decision to open my own eatery. Although it had always been my ambition, I had put it off in order to accumulate sufficient funds because I also needed to consider Amy during our marriage. But because we were divorced, I made the decision to go ahead and do it alone. I also chose to call the restaurant the name my parents had recommended. My buddies helped me approach a few potential investors, secure their support, and begin developing a business plan. I opened my own restaurant a few years later. After the divorce, it took me about 4 years to get back on my feet. I met my current wife 2 years later. We started conversing after she told me she loved my restaurant at a function where we met through friends. I asked her to marry me after 3 years of dating because I wanted to give love another try. Here we are with our son 10 years later. My business life has also improved over the past few years, in addition to my personal life. In my career, I've done fairly well. It all began with a restaurant, but because of its success, we gradually started to grow. I am the CEO of my own hospitality firm at the moment, and we operate a chain of hotels and restaurants that are quite well liked. We intend to grow it even further in the hopes of gaining recognition outside of the state. I have put a lot of effort into getting to where I am now, but it has been a difficult journey. Since of this, I recently agreed to an interview since I felt it was an indication that I had truly made it. However, after seeing that interview on the television, my family decided to get in touch with me again, and I honestly had no clue that it would generate such a storm in my life. I didn't really think my family would have watched it because the channel that carried it was a somewhat popular one. Even if they had, I didn't think they would arrive at my workplace. My workplace's location isn't particularly discreet, so they must have had little trouble finding me. Still, it was highly improper of them to arrive at my place of employment and insist on seeing me while I was there. Regretfully, they did precisely that 3 days ago. Seeing them after all this time was really odd. The receptionist told me that my family was waiting outside when they arrived, even though I was working. I initially assumed she was referring to my wife and kid, which would have been strange given that my son was at school and my wife was at work. She went on to say that my sister and parents were present to see me. I was having trouble processing what was happening at the time. I informed the receptionist that they would have to be ordered to go for the time being, but I would see them later. Naturally, they persisted and were making a scene, so I had to step in. Before I could talk to them and find out what was going on, I didn't want security to eject them from the premises. I therefore walked to the lobby to see them. They immediately pretended that nothing had changed in the over 2 decades since I had last seen them. They started praising me right away, telling me how wonderful it was that I had achieved enough accomplishment to make the headlines and how motivational my tale was. They should have been included in that story as members of my family, so hearing them say it felt odd. They began discussing how they had seen my family, but I tried to dismiss it by telling them I had to return to work. I had mentioned in my interview how helpful my wife and son had been to me along the way. They were referring to certain family images that were also featured on the channel. Since they had been away from us for a while, they began to express a wish to meet my wife and their grandson as soon as possible. At that point, they said I should have done more to reach out to them after the divorce and chastised me for not trying hard enough. It dawned on me that I might at last be able to find out what had transpired at that time. Therefore, rather than telling them to leave, I chose to let them speak. In an attempt to find some closure, I even sat down with them in the lobby. During their conversation, I learned the true reason my family had deserted me and why Amy had chosen to divorce me. Yes, Amy had been cheating on me, as you may have surmised by now. My parents had been helping her hide it the entire time, so I had never suspected it. However, they stated that they had their reasons, or at least, those they believed to be legitimate, so don't pass judgment too hastily. Amy had apparently been having an affair with my cousin, who was the son of my dad's older brother. Everything made sense when they eventually told me. I now saw why they had supported her, why I hadn't received an invitation to any family gatherings for the previous 20 years, and why I had been rejected without any fault of my own. I had never liked my cousin, let's call him Carl, since he was a rude, entitled brat. Unfortunately, his father and the rest of the family felt he should be given a free pass for everything because his mother had died when he was only 6 months old. No one ever told him how to act throughout his life, and he consistently got away with anything. The fact that my uncle, Carl's father, was my dad's supervisor and had founded the family business before my dad joined it didn't help either. When Carl decided he wanted to be with Amy after we were married and she agreed, my family felt compelled to support them. They couldn't take the chance of upsetting my uncle. But apparently it was easy for them to decide to risk their friendship with me. They did precisely that. They also informed me that my uncle made it very apparent during the divorce that he did not want any family members, including my parents and sister, to communicate with me in any way. After Amy said she was expecting my child, they apparently attempted to object. They would have to cut me off if they ever wished to communicate with their grandson. In addition, when Amy filed for divorce, I was never informed that she was expecting a child. I couldn't have predicted because she hadn't been displaying at the time either. She had moved out long before the divorce was finalized, so she hadn't been living with me. Therefore, even before my son was born, I was unaware that I had become a father. It seems that my daughter, who is now almost 20, believes Carl is her biological father even though she has never met me. In any case, my parents told me this about what actually occurred all those years ago. It felt like I was being told a story, and I was hardly able to process any of it at the time. To acknowledge that this was my reality, I had to pinch myself. My family thought that by achieving job security and establishing a bond with their granddaughter, they had effectively cut me off. They had cut me off because, in my opinion, they were simply cowards. They could have simply told me the truth and let me deal with it, but instead they decided to be scared of my dad's brother, acting as though he could do more than just drive my father out of the family business. My dad could have taken legal action in retaliation even at that point. I honestly can't think of a reason why you didn't notify me about Amy's pregnancy or the fact that I have a daughter. They sat on this for 20 years without saying anything until they realized I was doing well in life. They suddenly felt a great deal of pity for everything and wanted to make amends with me. Sadly for them, I was able to see through their deception. I told them I needed them to go as soon as they were done telling me everything because I didn't have the capacity to forgive them right now after what they had just told me. Since we were seated in my workplace's lobby and I didn't want to start a fight, I made an effort to be polite. I couldn't, however, rely on others to act similarly. As soon as I told them to go, they began complaining that I should consider their point of view and how challenging the situation had been for them as well. I informed them that I was positive they were only contacting me now because they wanted a share of my success. They strongly rejected it. My sister even went so far as to argue that they were the reason I was successful in the first place, as they had come up with the name for my restaurant back when it was still just a dream. Given that they hadn't helped me over the years and that I had created everything on my own with the assistance of my friends rather than them, I thought it was rather brave of her to make such a claim. It wasn't enough for them to claim credit for my accomplishment just because they suggested a name. I laughed at her because the idea was so ridiculous. I threatened to have her and my parents ejected from the building if they didn't leave right away. They persisted in their argument, stating that they would not go until we had resolved our differences. But I was not interested in carrying on the discussion. I therefore carried out my promise and had security eject them from the building. As they were being led away, they were obviously very unhappy and tried attempting to convince me that they had no other option. However, I don't believe that. They had an option, but they chose poorly, and now they will have to live with the repercussions. They have survived the previous 20 years without seeing me or my family, so I have no doubt that they will be able to do the same in the future. In any case, they haven't stopped attempting to get in touch with me 3 days after this happened. They haven't had the guts to return inside my workplace, but they have been showing up outside, sending emails to my work address, and texting me on social media. Their attitude has clearly changed as seen by the numerous apologies in their mails. They appear somewhat agitated as they wait for me to stop for them outside my place of employment. However, I ignore them and simply drive past. I almost feel sorry for them now because of how horrible things have gone. To be honest, I've discussed this with my wife because, no matter what I do about my family, we still need to consider my daughter, whom I was unaware of until a few days ago. We have been debating whether or not to track down my daughter and attempt to get in touch with her. We also have to deal with my family, who I don't think will leave until they have another opportunity to talk to me. My wife believes that perhaps I should invite them over and have a conversation with them in order to at least try to resolve the issue. Since this circumstance isn't healthy for my emotional health, she thinks it might help get rid of all the toxicity. But I'm not personally interested in doing it. Given everything I've learned and what I'm going through right now, I don't have the mental capacity to deal with them, so I just want to keep ignoring them till they go away. We are struggling greatly to decide how to proceed and handle this. After 20 years of no communication, I also question whether I'm wrong for not wanting to give my parents another chance to talk. Update 1. A week and 3 days have passed since my initial post, and my spouse and I have made the decision to keep ignoring my relatives. Fortunately, they haven't been showing up to my place of employment for the previous several days. This is most likely due to their fatigue or fear of security. In any case, I'm glad. It was much simpler for me to quit thinking about them after they stopped visiting. It appears that I was feeling guilty about how I was handling the matter because of their presence. I no longer feel bad about not responding to their texts. No matter how many times they apologize, nothing will change. No amount of apologies will make up for the fact that they have failed me as a family. I'm not even bothering to block them anymore, even though they've kept sending messages from different accounts and email addresses. What's the point? I'll continue to ignore them even if they try to apologize by making new accounts. We'll see how long they can continue this. Let's go on to the other problem we are facing, my daughter. Neither my wife nor I knew how to handle the matter. My parents told me where she attends college throughout our talk, so we have her name. I haven't taken any action yet, but my assistant was able to locate her social media profiles. I am unsure of if it is appropriate for me to contact her, and I'm unsure of how to inform her that I am her biological father. I can't just walk up to Amy's house and demand custody or anything because she's not a kid. Furthermore, given what I've learned about Amy, I'd prefer not to have her involved in this at all. I no longer have any regard for that woman or my family as a whole because they are all cowards with no courage, and I don't want anything to do with them. I can't say the same for my kid though. She is still my biological daughter, regardless of who reared her. Please let me know if you have any suggestions about how to approach her or if I should even be doing this. I also want to thank everyone who left a remark on my first post. I hope you can help me again because your advice has been incredibly useful. Update 2. My wife and I made the decision to move ahead after reading the comments on my last update. Waiting for the ideal moment or chance to get in touch with my daughter was pointless. We had to remove the band-aid and finish the job. We thought it wouldn't be appropriate to fly out to her because she lives in a different state, so we chose to message her first and see how things work out. We messaged her on Instagram and gave her the most polite explanation possible. We are merely awaiting a response at this time. She will undoubtedly find it difficult to accept, just as it is for me. The fact that my wife has been so understanding of my efforts to reconnect with my long-lost kid from my previous marriage is beyond me. We're trying our best, but I'm sure it's bringing up a lot of complex feelings for all of us. I would love to establish a relationship with my daughter, therefore I sincerely hope she responds. My parents haven't visited my place of employment in a long time. They wrote me a lengthy email yesterday in which they expressed their sincere regret for everything and their want to mend our friendship. They only required one opportunity. Additionally, they indicated they would wait for me to get in touch with them before contacting me again. To be honest, I'm a little relieved that they finally understood that I don't want to talk to them at this time. The last thing I need is for them to add additional drama to my already full plate. All I can hope for now is that they follow through on their promise and don't get in touch with me again. I will talk to them myself if I feel ready or want to at any time. But at this point, it doesn't appear probable that this will occur anytime soon. The situation has only gotten worse now that I know the true reason they haven't spoken to me in 20 years. I don't think the feeling of betrayal and hurt will go away anytime soon. There was at least one positive outcome from this. I learned more about my daughter, and I'm hoping she will choose to give our relationship another shot. In case she doesn't want to speak with us, I haven't yet told my kid about her. I don't want to give him unrealistic expectations. But if everything works out, he might see her as a sister, and I might meet the daughter I never knew I had. Right now, I'm feeling a lot of different emotions, and I'm making a lot of effort to control them. Update 3. I made contact with my daughter on social media approximately 2 weeks ago. I messaged her, telling her everything about myself and our relationship. I finally got a response today after waiting for 2 weeks. She only mentioned that she had discussed me with her mother and that she had discovered that I am her biological father. She was shocked by this, of course. She had no notion that she wasn't Carl's daughter and had thought he was her biological father for the last 20 years. She also told me that she wanted to see me and my family after learning the real tale of how her mother and I got to be this way. Since she doesn't have the money to visit us at this time and isn't talking to her family, we are taking a plane to see her this weekend. She didn't go into too much detail, but Amy first attempted to deny the message when she challenged her about it. But in the end, she had to be honest with her. Since I don't want to talk to Amy, I sincerely hope she doesn't get in touch with me. I haven't heard from her yet. When my family learned that I had contacted my daughter, they promptly betrayed their word and began attempting to speak with me. My uncle was obviously upset that I found out, and rightfully so, as they had worked for 20 years to make sure I never found out so that their lives wouldn't be disturbed. I've learned that my uncle is blaming my parents. My dad still fears his older brother, despite the fact that he no longer works for him and owns his own company. He has been pleading with me to explain that neither Carl nor my uncle were involved in my discovery, but I fail to understand the purpose. They are the only ones who could have maintained such a secret, so even if I did, I doubt anyone would believe me. The majority of my family has never been close to me, and they haven't bothered to talk to me in 20 years. It's amusing how frantic they are right now to keep their friendship with my uncle intact. But to be honest, I don't give a damn. I lost out on 20 years of a relationship with my daughter because of them. This, I believe, is the least I can do. Update 4. I finally got to meet my kid today with my family. It was initially uncomfortable, then moved, but overall it was simply lovely. Despite having grown up with two of the worst people I've ever met, she seems to be a decent and caring person. She is a very mature and clever young woman, whether it is due to her natural disposition or to the fact that they raised her well. During our lengthy talk, we discussed Amy and Carl's situation. She told me that she didn't care that they didn't approve of her meeting us. She doesn't care what her folks think now that she knows the truth. She doesn't intend to eliminate Amy and Carl from her life entirely because they don't have any other children but her, but she will undoubtedly put them out of her life for a while as she tries to come to terms with everything. She informed me that she also needed time to begin developing a relationship with me. I completely understand that she's in a really strange mental state at the moment. She seemed to get along well with my wife and her half-brother, and we had a great day overall. During supper, we discovered that my parents, who are her grandparents, had maintained communication with her throughout the entire time. Given that they were her grandfather's brother's family rather than her biological grandparents, she always thought it was odd how sentimental they were about her. Now they understand why they were so devoted to her. But now that she has learned all of this, she and I both view them differently. Since I'm a lot older than her, I can probably relate to her feelings, but not totally. Having been deceived by those she thought were closest to her throughout her life, she is just 20 years old and is likely finding it much more difficult to cope. In any case, we will both need to work on this, and maybe things will improve in the future. We're going to make an effort to make it the greatest it can be, so I know it must be. The fact that the meeting went well and that my family and I both seem satisfied after everything makes me very happy. No matter what Carl, Amy, or my family have done, I'm also rather happy with the situation. The important thing is that we finally have an opportunity to put things right after all these years, and I'm going to take advantage of it. My sister attacked me and stole my boyfriend 6 years ago. Now, my parents are attempting to reconcile us by inviting my estranged sister to my bridal shower. My sister is 26 and I'm 28. After a horrible incident that I will describe in a moment, we haven't spoken for about 6 years. For whatever reason, my parents never discouraged the fierce sibling rivalry that existed between my sister and me as we grew up. They would really encourage us to compete more. In retrospect, I don't think that was a smart move because it caused us to become really envious of one another. Perhaps our relationship would have been better if they had taken care of it sooner rather than later. When we were younger, we could at least occasionally set aside our differences. But as we became older, our animosity for one another increased. When we reached high school, we hardly spoke to one another, and we enjoyed it that way. After that, I left for college and only saw my sister when I got home, which was somewhat preferable than always being around someone who was unpleasant. I began dating my fiancé around the time I was set to graduate. He finally plucked up the courage to ask me out before I graduated from college, after we had been friends for 3 years. Since I too thought he was great, I said sure. Since we had been friends for years and it didn't seem like a huge deal, I moved in with him after graduation. I brought him home for supper one weekend after we had been dating for 3 months because I wanted to introduce him to my parents. It just so happened that my sister, who had just begun college, had also made the decision to spend the weekend at home. It was already a formula for disaster, and we were both there. At the time, my life was going really well. I had a lovely boyfriend, a career, and my own apartment. My sister, however, wasn't doing as well. She was angry that she had to settle for her second choice of college after failing to get into her first choice. My parents later told me that she was having a hard time making friends at college, which is why she was coming home so frequently. I could tell my sister wasn't pleased when I presented my boyfriend to my parents. In the background, she pouted. I introduced them even though my partner was aware of my tense connection with her. She instantly turned on her charm as I introduced her. I tried not to be bothered by it, even though it seemed strange. But then things became more bizarre. My sister was very interested in my boyfriend's life and kept attempting to talk to him when we were all sitting around talking. We were both frightened, but we remained silent. Then she went too far and began openly flirting with him in front of me throughout dinner. She wasn't even subtle about it. She was clearly doing it to annoy me. I didn't want my boyfriend to realize how dysfunctional our family was. So I tried to ignore it for a time, but I was at my breaking point. Since he was my lover, I lost my temper and urged my sister to stop since it was repulsive that she was flinging herself at him in that manner. She simply rolled her eyes and continued to speak to him. I snapped and screamed at her, telling her that he was my visitor and that she should show him respect since she was making him feel uncomfortable. She was only assisting my lover in realizing that there were alternatives to me, and I recall her saying that he deserved better. We began cursing at each other because of the manner she stated it, which really irritated me. She wasn't doing as well as I was, so I dubbed her a loser and stated she was resentful. She was deeply affected by that remark. She pulled me over and slapped me after grabbing my hair across the table. Since we hadn't had a physical altercation since middle school, I was initially too surprised to respond. However, it escalated into a full-fledged fight after she struck me. We were so violent that my boyfriend and our parents had to break us apart. Even though we were both hurt and scratched up by the end, we continued to yell at one another. It was my partner who pulled me away, got me in the car, and drove us home while attempting to reassure me the whole time. That conflict might have lasted much longer if he hadn't been beside me, so I was glad to have him by my side because I was pretty worked up. I completely stopped talking to my sister after this episode. Although we had battled previously, it had never been this vicious. For me, it was the final straw. Since I was already living apart from her, I must admit that I no longer felt compelled to think of her as a member of my family. My parents called me the day following the event to inform me that they had reprimanded my sister. They hoped we could work things out in the end, even if she wasn't prepared to apologize. I informed them that I had no interest in resolving the matter. I didn't want anything to do with her anymore, therefore I wanted our relationship to stay awful. They attempted to convince me otherwise, but I reminded them they shared some of the responsibility. They had never recognized our fierce sibling rivalry since we were little and had even fostered it. They therefore couldn't be shocked that we didn't want to be together. We got into a fight because they didn't agree with me. They apologized over the phone a few days later and acknowledged their error. It seemed a little meaningless at the moment, but I've forgiven them. Even though I had already made the decision not to talk to my sister, I didn't want to sever my ties with my parents. It's been 6 years since that happened, and I haven't spoken to my sister since. But as long as they don't pressure me to make amends, I don't mind that my parents and she have a typical relationship. We seldom talk, but I have seen her at family gatherings. We avoid each other, even on holidays, and I like it that way. We don't get along, and everyone in the family knows it, but no one understands why. They only know that we got into a fight, and I haven't changed anything because neither of us looked good after it. I kept it a secret from my family for over 6 years, but during my bridal shower, I finally revealed the truth. In addition to my bridesmaids, my maid of honor had only invited close relatives and friends. Since we weren't adhering to the custom of just inviting women, my fiancé was also present. I wanted everyone I cared about to be there. Nevertheless, my parents chose to invite my estranged sister as well for whatever reason. Sincerely, I have no idea what they were thinking, but I was taken aback when they entered with her. I was surprised to discover that my sister appeared just as surprised to see me. When they walked in, the room became quiet, and there seemed to be a standoff. My parents approached me and spoke to us both after what seemed like a lifetime. They said that a lot had changed in the 6 years following the tragedy. Above all, they expected us to make amends because they thought we were older and more mature. Her face made it obvious that my sister had been duped by her parents to get her there. I informed my parents they had no right to do this on such a significant day for me before she could say anything. I gently requested that they go with my sister. My parents wouldn't leave, so I tried to maintain my dignity so as not to ruin the occasion. They advised me to move on from the past. They gave the impression that nothing important had occurred, as though it would be simple for me to go on, which annoyed me. I reenacted the entire episode to help them remember it, and to make sure everyone else knew exactly what had happened 6 years prior. I then inquired if anyone in the room felt that I could simply let go of this. If I had married someone else, it would have been a different story, but I was marrying the same man with whom my sister had openly flirted when I first brought him home to meet the family. She had shamelessly done it in front of me, treating him as though he were a participant in a tournament that he had never consented to. Above all, she attacked me first after doing all of that, simply because I called her out on her actions and labeled her a loser. I had never had someone attempting to physically harm me in that way before, so it was traumatic for me. Despite everything, she acted as if nothing had happened and never apologized to me in the previous 6 years. I didn't feel obligated to forgive her or move on from the past. I never allowed someone like her back into my life because I felt it was more vital to cling to the past. My parents' assumption that they could simply bring her to my bridal shower and expect us to comply was absurd. Fortunately, my sister realized her mistake and left before my parents could dispute much further. My mother followed her, presumably to appease her, as I assume she wasn't pleased about being misled either. My father stayed with me for a short while, but I informed him that since he had disappointed me, I didn't want to talk to him just now. He became irritated and accused me of being irrational, claiming that I was acting like a brat and that it made no sense to hold on to something that had happened 6 years prior. Although I didn't think I was being a brat, I told him to go since I didn't want to argue with him. He also left after a few minutes. After that, I was so overwhelmed that I had to take a few minutes off to gather myself. Fortunately, my fiancé and maid of honor supported me, and after a little while, I was back to my usual self. Everyone else cooperated, seeing that I needed a diversion and didn't want to think about my sister or dad, and we resumed the celebration as if nothing had happened. After the encounter, my fiancé and I went home, and we didn't discuss the situation further. I was okay with the fact that I hadn't heard from my parents since this incident, which occurred roughly 5 days ago. I felt that we should spend some time apart after what they did. Although I didn't anticipate hearing from them right away, they did, and not to offer an apology, but rather to hold me responsible for my sister's predicament. My mother called me this morning on the phone. As soon as I responded, she instructed me to contact my aunt and ensure that she offered my sister the position she had been discussing. I urged my mother to back up since she seemed agitated and panicked, and I didn't know what she was talking about. She went on to explain that my sister had been out of work for roughly 6 months due to layoffs and downsizing at her prior employer. She had to move back in with our parents a few weeks ago after realizing she could no longer afford the rent. She had been searching for a job, but she had not been able to locate one that she liked or that paid enough. My mother had discussed this with my aunt, who was launching a new company. Because my sister had been working in marketing before, my aunt had first chosen to appoint her as head of marketing. However, my aunt stopped replying and eventually revoked the invitation following the bridal shower episode, in which I told her what had transpired 6 years prior. Since I had always been my aunt's favorite, I didn't find it unexpected, and I believed it to be a plausible explanation when my mother forwarded the message my aunt had sent her to me. My aunt stated in her reply that it was evident my sister had severe anger management problems based on her understanding of the incident I described. My aunt wasn't pleased that she hadn't even offered an apology, not even during the bridal shower. Furthermore, my aunt stated that she had first chosen to hire my sister because she was related, but that she had interviewed a better competent applicant for the job a few weeks prior. She would now offer the position to the more competent applicant since she had changed her mind. That seemed totally reasonable to me, and I was genuinely glad my aunt had a change of heart. I informed my mother that I couldn't do anything about it after reading her message because, as someone who has seen the negative effects of nepotism in the job, I didn't want my aunt to be the type of person who makes things worse. Otherwise, my sister would have been employed because of nepotism. The real reason my sister wasn't hired was that it appeared my aunt had discovered someone more suited for the position. Since this was my aunt's business life and I didn't want to cross any lines, I informed her I wouldn't talk to her. In an attempt to destroy my sister's reputation and image in front of the family, my mother began to lose her head and began screaming at me. Since I hadn't discussed the issue in years, she suggested I didn't need to bring it up during my bridal shower. Even though I had started the argument by calling my sister a loser, especially knowing it would hit her where it hurt, she thought I purposefully painted her as unstable and nasty in order to garner the family's sympathy and make myself appear to be the nice guy. For the record, I wasn't hiding anything when I recounted the incident. I had stated that I had labeled her a loser before to her attack. Even yet, I don't believe that calling her derogatory names excused her physical altercation. It was just unjust for my mother to say that I brought up the incident in order to harm my sister's reputation. I blocked my parents and hung up. After giving it some thought, I'm not sure if discussing the incident was a wise decision. My mother said over the phone that I hadn't given my sister a chance, despite the fact that she had evolved over the years. That was pretty rude of me, she said. I brought up my sister's attack on me 6 years ago, which resulted in her losing a job offer. Am I correct in bringing this up? Update 1. Hi, Reddit. Before I discuss the events that followed my initial post, I would like to express my gratitude to everyone who took the time to leave a remark. I appreciate your nice words and suggestions very much. Well, let's talk about what transpired after I blocked my parents. My parents were unable to reach me because my sister had been barred for the previous 6 years. They chose to come see me as they had no other method to get in touch with me. I truly don't have time to handle all of this because I'm getting married in a few weeks. I already have a lot on my plate. Since I had just returned from work and my fiancé and I needed to travel right away for a last-minute wedding dress fitting, I told them to leave when they arrived. We were going to go, but they had arrived at the wrong time, and I knew that if we opened the door, they would find a way to continue chatting and irritate me. They didn't go even after I threatened to contact the police. To be honest, I didn't want to call the police since I thought it would be excessive. Being the type of person who phones the police for everything was not something I wanted to be. We agreed to let them in, give them a cursory hearing, and then leave after speaking with my fiancé. After making up our minds, we invited them inside, opened the door, and ordered them to hurry up because we had other places to be. Fortunately, my folks didn't mince words. They said that my aunt had withdrawn her offer to hire my sister due to my actions at my bridal shower. They insisted that I talk to my aunt and make sure my sister found employment because, in theory, I was at fault. I didn't want to repeat myself because it was the same argument. I informed them that I couldn't do anything about it because I had already spoken to my mother about it over the phone. They knew I was busy and I'm getting married in a few weeks, so it seemed senseless to come to my place and discuss it again. My sister then cut me off. They came for other reasons, she claimed, besides the job offer. I was taken aback by that as it was our first conversation in 6 years. She went on to tell me that it was really because of her that they were there. She felt compelled to apologize to me. Since I'm still unsure of how I felt at the time, I genuinely don't know what to say to you all. Since I plainly don't trust her, I had serious doubts about her intentions. I chose to be direct with her as a result. I questioned if she truly wanted to apologize or if she was just there to do so because she believed I could help her land the job. I informed her that I couldn't help her, therefore there was no use in wasting her breath if it was only about the job. She appeared a little taken aback by my candor, but she was able to explain that she had come to apologize and that our parents were there to discuss the job. It was obvious they hadn't talked about this because even my parents appeared astonished when I looked at them. My sister, though, seemed unconcerned. She said that she was merely there to apologize and had no interest in the position. Over the previous 6 years, she had given her actions against me a lot of thought, but she had always found a reason not to say sorry. However, she was unable to deny the reality that she had mistreated me after the bridal shower. My fiancé and I were still having a hard time processing everything, but I could tell she was serious based on her tone and conduct. She informed me that she had been resentful of me since she was a child because she felt like she had to compete with me. Since nothing mattered in the real world, she understood that she had wasted her entire youth and adolescence competing with me. She felt bad about it because we could have been friends, especially because I had made multiple attempts to be her buddy. She acknowledged that she had pushed me away because she always thought of me as a rival. I had felt the same way, so hearing her utter all of it was crazy. I'm embarrassed to say that as she related her story, I began to cry. After that, she spoke to my fiancé and expressed regret for the way she had treated him during their one and only encounter. She acknowledged that the apology was long overdue and that she had been so preoccupied with defeating me that she had failed to recognize the type of person she had become. She didn't wait for our response once she was done. She merely stated that we didn't have to pardon her. She only wanted to let it out, and now that she had, she would stop bothering us. My parents, my fiancé and I were the only people left in the room when she left. Since none of us had anticipated it, we were all sitting in awe, trying to comprehend what had just transpired. My fiancé and I went out for my fitting after my parents eventually left without a word. We didn't talk about any of it until we got home. We only began discussing my sister's remarks approximately 30 minutes ago. Even though it took her 6 years, I felt that her apology was extraordinarily mature. She meant every word, based on her actions. My fiancé and I are currently debating whether or not to forgive her. Since we haven't even finished processing it, it's too soon to tell. We're tempted to get in touch with her later and express our forgiveness. I need more time before I can reassure her that everything is fine, even though I've already unblocked her. Even though it took her many years to realize we could have been friends, that is something I'm truly happy about. Update 2. Hello. I just realized that in my previous update, I neglected to express what I intended to do with relation to my parents. To be honest, I forgot about it because I was so preoccupied with my sister's predicament. In any case, my folks haven't gotten in touch with us since our previous visit a few days ago. We're going to keep avoiding them because I don't think they're sorry for anything. The way my sister and I ended up together is one of the many things I hold my parents responsible for. They still had the opportunity to be better parents, but they blew it. They have consistently made it all but impossible for me to maintain them in my life, despite my best efforts. We've fought and argued a lot over the last 6 years, and I've always tried to forgive them, but I'm at a loss now. People who obviously don't care about my feelings, or even my sister's, if I'm being honest, can't continue to be excused. In the end, we won't communicate with them, and I doubt they'll come to my wedding. However, my fiancé and I want to get in touch with them in a few days to inform them that they are no longer invited at the wedding, just to be safe. Update 3. Hello everyone. Last week I got married. Everything was lovely and fantastic, exactly as I had envisioned, and I had a great time. My parents were not present, as was to be expected. My spouse and I didn't even have to make contact with them. They informed me via email that there had been a huge mistake and that they would not be attending. They said my sister and I had begun to demonize them and that they didn't need to be reminded that we blamed them for the tense relationship. They said that, despite their best efforts to be excellent parents to us, they now intend to take some time off and live their separate lives without worrying about their daughters because we don't value their presence in our lives. I mean, if that's what they want, I'm okay with it. Happier news. A few days after I published my most recent update, I contacted my sister. I told her that I would love for her to attend my wedding and that I accepted her apology. It was a very joyful day, and she kindly accepted my invitation and attended the wedding. It's absurd to think that I would have sneered at my parents a few months ago if they had informed me that my sister would attend my wedding instead of them. But now we are here. In any case, I'm glad everything went without a hitch and that I'm at last getting back on track with my sister. This is sufficient for me for the time being, but perhaps my parents will change their minds and apologize to us. Life has never been better, and my husband and I will soon be departing for our honeymoon. Am I the asshole for telling my sister I don't know if I love her after finding out about her 5-year affair? Original post. My sister, 32, moved in with me because she got pregnant 5 months ago from what she claimed was a one-night stand. I love my sister, so of course, I took her in. My husband is overseas for 6 more months, so it was nice to have her around because I care about her very much. On Monday, I came home and saw my sister and a strange woman in a screaming match on my doorstep. I obviously didn't know what was happening, but I saw the woman poking my pregnant sister's shoulder, so I intervened. I sent my sister inside, and she begged me to send the woman away. I didn't understand what was going on, but I wanted the altercation to end for everyone's sake, so I told the woman as much. Then she started screaming, asking me if I was also sleeping with her husband. I was like. And then she basically revealed that my sister had been having an affair with her husband for 5 years. 5 years. She had everything printed out, chats, photos, emails, receipts. It was disturbing to see, and I didn't want to go through it all. But a few things were established. My sister knew about his wife. She knew she was the mistress and liked it. This woman was a stay-at-home mom to their 4 kids, one of whom has a severe disability from a car accident. Her husband knew about my sister's pregnancy and even took her on a baby moon to celebrate it. The affair had been going on the entire time, with my sister believing he would eventually leave his wife for her. My sister had fully embraced the role of being the other woman, and was emotionally invested in their relationship, despite his repeated lies about leaving his wife. I told the woman I was very sorry and that I obviously didn't know, but I asked her to leave because this wasn't going anywhere, and I didn't want the neighbors to call the police. She was furious but gave me her number on a post-it, begging me not to let her husband stay at my house. I assured her that no man was stepping foot in my home. My sister was begging me not to believe the woman, calling her a vindictive ex-wife. I told her, all right then, let's look up the marriage online. Let's see if a motion for dissolution of marriage was ever submitted. We fought hard. My sister kept saying I would never understand and that they loved each other, but he just couldn't leave his wife, blah blah blah. I called her dumb and naive. The next day, I told her she could stay here because I didn't want her to become a financial burden on that woman in any way, but I also told her that right now, I didn't want to engage with her. My sister asked me if I still loved her, and I told her honestly, right now, I can't say I do. I will always help my nephew and not endanger you, but I can't like you because you've shown me you're not a trustworthy person. I told her I didn't trust her not to try anything with my husband, and I didn't trust her with anything at all, so I made her sign a tenants agreement. She's been begging me to forgive her, and I told her there's nothing to forgive. I just don't know who she is anymore. Ada, some of OOP's comments. Commenter, NTA, you need to make sure she is out of your home before your husband comes home, because you are right, you cannot trust her. OP, I wouldn't worry. I trust my husband 100%. Not my sister anymore though. I already told him and asked if she ever did something and he said no. Commenter, NTA, your sister's behavior was vile and inexcusable. That poor woman and her children. Her husband is an absolute POS. OP, I said the affair started 5 years ago, right? Now guess when she wife and the kid got into an accident that left the kid disabled. Commenter, and your sister knew? She's a despicable person and I'm amazed how strong you are for still keeping her housed with you. NTA OOP. She met the flicking kids. Took them to the zoo with the bastard. Commenter. Wow, that is severely ballsy. OOP. She wanted them to get to know her so she could hop right into the mom role as soon as he divorced his wife. Yeah, right. OOP's parents. They died 7 years ago. Commenter. You should ask for pics so you know what this guy looks like, and arrange to get outdoor cameras at the least so your sis isn't sneaking him around when you're at work. It should be grounds for eviction if she does allow him around. OOP. I saw him in the pictures his wife showed me. Also I work from home ATM. So no dice why OOP lets her live with OOP. One of my reasons is that I don't want her to get an apartment on his dime when that money should go to his kids. Also, my nephew doesn't deserve to be born homeless. OOP expands. She pays me no rent. So if he gives her money there is nothing that I can do. But living on his dime in an apartment he would pay for and possibly put in his name. Dangerous. Commenter. Just curious. What does your husband say about this situation? OOP. He said that it is very disappointing she turned out to be like that and said that it is difficult to trust her as she proved to be such a good liar. She is the one who helped me with the tenancy agreement and all. Commenter. Downvoted? Yeah, that whole thing might just be so that she has tenant rights so that she can try to ruin your fucking life. OP. Listen, you don't know which country I'm from. We got legal help and did this together with someone that actually has a clue. We saved our asses like this. If not that, would be akin to squatters' rights in the US. Commenter. OP, what are you going to do once the baby is here? Assuming the dad wants to be in the kid's life at least somewhat, I think it's unreasonable to ban him from the house. OOP, if she wants him there she can get her very own apartment. If she still wants to stay and save up for the baby she has to adhere to my house rules. She is free to go and see an outside. To another commenter. I put up my rules. If she wants to stay she has to adhere to them. She has been told. She still has 4 months to make that decision. If she wants him physically with her after birth she can do that. But not in my house. How the wife got OOP's address. She got the address from BIS phone update post. First, I'd like to clarify a few things. I am not going to tell my sister to get rid of the baby. That's not my place, and I would never suggest such a thing. Also, I am not going to install tracking software on her phone or demand access to all her devices. That's invasive and wrong. I've been thinking a lot, and while I can't say that I don't love my sister, it's very hard to feel that love right now. I don't know who she is anymore. It's not just that she lied to me, it's what she did and how convinced she is that she was justified because they were in love. She's brought chaos into my home that I opened up to her. I'm deeply disappointed in her, and I just don't like her at the moment. I'm letting her stay with me because I don't want her to become dependent on him. I don't think he's a good man either, and as a social worker, I've seen these scenarios too many times. My sister is already deluded. I don't need to open the door to a dependency that's also financial. Now, on to the update. I haven't been punishing my sister, but I've been treating her like a roommate. This is driving her crazy. She's begging me to go back to how things were before, but I can't. I told her that I need time and that things can't just return to normal overnight. She tried to explain how it all happened. She admitted that she always knew he was married but believed she could tell how unhappy he was and felt he deserved to be happy. They met at a bar a few weeks after his son's accident. He told her that his wife hadn't touched him since it happened and that he was about to explode. I asked her why she would involve herself with a married man, knowing the hurt it would cause. She said she wanted to be a wife and a good mom, and that included his kids. She had hoped he would divorce his wife so they could all move on and finally be happy together. I just stared at her, unable to comprehend how she could rationalize her actions. A few days later, he appeared at our house, claiming he had left his wife and wanted to be with my sister. I told him to leave immediately or I would call the police. My sister was furious with me, accusing me of ruining her chance at happiness. I made it clear to her. If he comes over again, I will evict her. She's free to date anyone she wants, but not under my roof. I also told her that if she plans to have him around after the baby is born, she'll need to find her own place. Word has gotten around our community about the affair. While we were grocery shopping, a woman even spat on my sister. Many of her friends have cut ties with her, calling her a homewrecker. Some are married themselves and don't want her near their husbands. I haven't said I told you so even once. We unexpectedly ran into his wife at a local cafe. My sister wanted to apologize and suggested that maybe they could all have a good relationship for the sake of the kids. The wife laughed coldly and said, "You made your choices, now live with them. Don't expect me to make this easier for you." My sister is devastated and has been lying in bed ever since. I'm taking care of her physical needs, making sure she eats, stays hydrated and attends her prenatal appointments, but I can't bring myself to comfort her emotionally. I just don't have it in me right now. OOP's comments. Commenter, is your sister mentally sound? She seems to be living in a fantasy world. NTA OOP, I don't think she is having a psychotic break. I think she is in too far, and now that she has destroyed her life, she is trying to make it work. Commenter, to get in this far she can't be a good person, and neither can he. They're both so insanely selfish that they put getting laid over destroying his kid's family and home. I feel horribly for that child, its parents are trash. OOP, that has also been my thoughts. Commenter. I asked the last time and wasn't answered. How did your sister make it to like 32, IARC, and wasn't living with you? Was she working? Why did she immediately stop working the second she found out she was pregnant? If she didn't, why did she give up her apartment and move in with you? A 32 years old living alone had some way to support herself, and people don't just quit their jobs overnight because they got pregnant unless it's because they are in a stable relationship and the partner was willing to support them, in which case again moving in with you would not be necessary. You talk about not being financially dependent on him, but now she's financially dependent on you? Why would you agree to allow her to become financially dependent on you, and why would you accept the cost of caring for an adult and her child just because it's your sister? If she is not working, she should absolutely not have the kid, and you should absolutely not be bearing the brunt of her bad decisions. OP, I had quite a few, so I don't believe I read yours. Or at least not fully. I answered someone who asked something similar. Yes, she has a job. She moved in with me to save up for her baby. She is on maternity leave. Her job is not super high paying. I am not responding to the rest of the comment as it seems more aggressive than helpful. To a downvoted comment saying that's not how maternity leave works in the US. Good thing we are not in the US. Neither the UK. To another, ruder commenter. Yeah, you get 100% of the pay for 6 months, after that 80% or something like that for 6 more months, and I think 50% if you go over a year. Also notice how I said not super high paying. Commenter, I was spit on multiple times growing up because I was a bastard. I received a lot of hate because my brother was an unwed teen mom. Random people, teachers, churchgoers, a good chunk of the so-called family. Small towns suck more than I can say. OP, they go pretty hard in the name of Jesus. Hypocrites of you ask me when asked where OP lives, I won't say. But we are quite religious here. Old women think they are the law and all that. Commenter, holy shit, someone spit on her? What are you people, Amish? OP. Catholic commenter. He appeared at our house, claiming he had left his wife and wanted to be with my sister. Sure, he left his wife after 5 years. Coincidentally, at the moment she discovered everything. I'm completely sure it's not the wife who dumped him. Per SOOP. I think the same thing. Commenter, your sister really is a piece of work. What did she expect would happen once news of the affair got out? If it weren't for the fact that she's pregnant, I wouldn't have put it past someone to do more than spit at her. The child is going to grow up hated by affair partners, soon to be ex and their children. OOP, I think worse is coming to her. I know our town. That's why she mostly stays in right now. Someone alleges OOP is only blaming the sister and not the affair partner. I blame him. He is a horrible man with no morals. He couldn't even wait for his son to be out of the hospital to start an affair because his ballpark wasn't getting scratched by his wife, who was also in the accident. I hate him. I hate him so badly that I resent that he exists. But he is not in my life. I didn't know him. He has no cards in my game. I am so mad at my sister for not opki fucking up her life but also bringing chaos in mine after I opened my home to her. I am mad she lied to me for 5 years, but most of all, I am disgusted with her horrible selfish actions. She wasn't lured into this. She knew from the beginning that she was a mistress. She knew what she was doing. She knew it was wrong, and yet she kept doing it and lying through her teeth. I don't know who she is. New update. Post, my sister just won't stop talking about him. Every day it's the same story. Their perfect future together, the apartment they're moving into, how everything will be great once his divorce is done. She's completely lost in this delusion, acting like none of the lies and betrayal matter. I can't stand it. She made him write me letters. Yes, actual letters. As if that's going to magically make me approve of him. She leaves them around the house, thinking that if I just read them, I'll suddenly understand how sorry he is and how much he loves her. I haven't responded to a single one. It's ridiculous. I told her over and over that I don't want anything to do with him, but she keeps pushing, as if she can wear me down. It's beyond frustrating. Then came the talk of moving in together. She sat me down and asked for my blessing, telling me how important it was to her that I support their relationship. She actually wanted me to meet him, to give him a chance. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. That's when I drew the line. I told her flat out, if she moves in with him, I'm done. I told her I would go low contact, that I wouldn't be part of their life and that she's on her own if she goes through with this. If she wanted my support, she had to leave him, full stop. For a moment, I thought she was finally getting it. She showed me screenshots from his ex-wife. The ex had pretended she wanted him back, and this guy fell for it immediately. He told her how much he missed her. How my sister was a mistake. How he wanted to fix things with his family. My sister was crushed. She came to me with the screenshots, crying, and I thought, for a couple of days, that maybe, just maybe, she would finally see him for who he really is. I was hopeful. But then, as usual, he wormed his way back in. He told her he only said those things because he was afraid his ex would take the kids away. And of course, she bought it. Now she's actively moving in with him, packing up her things and making all these plans like nothing happened. The screenshots. Forgotten. The lies. Excused. She's determined to be with him no matter what, and I'm done. I told her I'm not helping her anymore. No more driving her to appointments. No more checking on her. Nothing. I'm not going to pretend everything's okay while she's diving headfirst into this disaster. Now I barely talk to her. If she asks where the tea is, I'll tell her. If she wants to know if there's milk left, I'll answer. But that's it. I'm emotionally cut off, and I told her straight. I'll be here if things fall apart, if she's in danger, but I am not going to be a part of this train wreck. She's on her own now. The community backlash hasn't slowed down either. Everywhere we go people are whispering, staring and judging. They're not just looking at her, they're looking at me too. People know she's living with me and I've started hearing comments at work about why I haven't completely cut her off. It's affecting my life now, and I just can't carry her mistakes anymore. Her friends? All gone. The ones who were married have cut ties completely. She's isolated herself, but instead of waking up, she's clinging harder to him. Holding on to this fantasy that everything will work out. But I'm done caring. She's made her choice, and now she has to live with the fallout. This is the final update because I'm finished. I'm done trying, done caring, done dealing with the mess she's made. She can have her life with him, but I'm not going to be part of it. Some of OOP's comments. Commenter, NTA. Let her be, kick her out sooner. This started to affect your life more than her. OOP. She is leaving by the 23rd latest. To another commenter. Contracts have been terminated. She is out by the 23rd commenter. She'll lose him as she got him. You'll hear from her in the future when he cheats on her. OOP. I give it 3 months. Commenter. I don't blame you for being over this whole mess. As my mom would say, I won't be shitting out what you eat. Meaning, the consequences of your sister's actions are for her and her alone to deal with. You've been a good sister and done all you can to make her see the error of her ways. Now you just have to let the chips fall where they may. I'm nosy, can you come back and tell us her sob story when she comes crawling back? Oop, I like that idiom. I don't know. Maybe if I need to vent. But I hope that this is the last of my involvement. Commenter. Yeah, last update I predicted things wouldn't change and she would just start affecting you too, and now even indirectly she's affecting you socially. So I know she's not gonna leave without you kicking her out. Hopefully you see that sooner than later. Good luck. OP. I think she is thrilled about leaving to finally be with him. LOL. Commenter. I knew a woman like OP's sister. The man never left his wife. He never got a place with the woman I knew. She's alone, he's still with his wife. OOP, I don't think his wife is taking him back. Commenter, NTA your sister is reaching rock bottom, it's now up to her to get out or go further down. It's pathetic she can't face reality, maybe because she intentionally lost everything and everyone because of her selfish choices. For your sake it's best to maintain low to no contact. OOP, it's sad for my nephew. But he has 2 parents now. I am concentrated on my life now. OOP's final thoughts. Commenter, when it happens come back and tell us please. I want to see how things will fall apart. Don't delete your account, keep just for this, please. OP, I don't think I will. People are seriously unkind. I just got 2 death threats from my DMs. One for being a shifty sister and the other for housing a homewrecker. My parents disowned me and cut me out of their will because I'm not their biological child, but inheriting from a distant relative changed everything. Let us start from the beginning. My life changed dramatically when I was 14. Around this time, my mother decided to relax again, this time with a man whose previous marriage had produced a son. Jake, already 3 years older than me, was 17. Let's also admit that we didn't get along right away. The ink on their marriage certificate had hardly dried when the tension began to rise. At first, it was the tiny issues that arise when strangers are notified that they are suddenly family and brought together. Jake would leave dirty dishes in the sink, assuming they would clean themselves. Of course, I was the one who got a lecture from my mother or new stepfather about the kitchen mess. Alternatively, I would see my shampoo disappearing faster than usual, only to discover Jake with perfectly maintained hair that appeared to have resulted from using my favorite product. It was strange, but I felt upset by more than just Jake's antics. Tom, my stepfather, handled things in the same manner. I seemed to be the problem whenever things went wrong. He'd think I was responsible without even asking. Then there was my mom. She was too focused on making this new family dynamic work to see what was happening. She'd brush it off, cover for Jake, and pretend everything was fine. I could immediately detect the difference in expectations. Mom and Tom announced they were expecting a kid around a year into our difficult living situation. At that time, everything changed. Suddenly, everything revolved around the newborn. The house required renovations, and guess which room was chosen for the nursery? Exactly, mine. I was shoved into a cramped, claustrophobic guest room with barely enough room for my possessions. It felt like a demotion, a clear sign of my role in this new family structure. A few months later, Nathan, my new half-brother, was born and quickly became the center of attention. Jake felt the same shift and grew even more entitled. He dropped out of college and moved back home, bringing with him a whirlwind of late-night parties and questionable pals who came and went at all hours. Tom dismissed my protests about the noise and trash, while my mother simply looked sorrowful, as if to say, "What can we do?" It was infuriating. I started spending more time at friends' places, anywhere I could find routine. My escape ended up being school. I stayed as long as I could, joining every organization and taking extra classes. It was more than just adolescent defiance. It was about survival. Home became a place where I always felt as if I was walking on eggshells, waiting for the next explosion. It was suffocating. One evening stands vividly in my mind. I got home later than usual to find the house utterly still. A note on the refrigerator indicated that they had gone out to dinner, without me. I hadn't even been invited to this family supper. That note struck harder than I expected. I felt invisible, as if I did not truly belong. And it stung. Not shortly after my 18th birthday, everything almost broke. I felt Tom disliked me having any excuse to leave the house, despite the fact that I worked part-time. He repeatedly told me that it would jeopardize my academic progress. Then one evening, I returned home to discover my room utterly trashed. Jake hosted a party while my mom and Tom were gone, and my room suffered as a result. A broken lamp, alcohol stains on my project documentation. It was an outright breach of my privacy. I challenged them at breakfast the next morning. Tom responded coldly and contemptuously, "You should have been more responsible with your belongings." My mother simply sighed and whispered something about families coming together and letting go. I had finished letting things pass. Everything I did during those years seemed to be scrutinized, but not in a way that suggested concern for my well-being. Rather, it appeared like they were waiting for me to make a mistake so they could blame me. Jake, who had turned into a professional couch potato, appeared to get away with it all. Although Nathan, my tiny half-brother, was still a child, the amount of coddling he received revealed who the favorite was. I remember one time when I was working on a large science project that I found really interesting. Even at home working on it was nearly impossible. I desired silence, so I set up a workstation in the corner of the living room. It felt like I was trying to build something delicate in the heart of Times Square. I eventually had enough. Jake would play loud music, Nathan would run about shouting, and Tom would complain about how my project was taking up too much space or making a mess. After packing, I went to see a buddy, whose parents allowed me to work in their tranquil dining room. For the first time in what felt like forever, I was able to concentrate. That was when I realized how odd my home life had become. My friend said, "You're always welcome here." The invitation was easy, yet it meant everything to me. For me, home was just a place I couldn't wait to leave. Home is supposed to be a secure refuge, yet every hour away from it helped me breathe a little easier. I started working extra shifts at my job. Of course, Tom didn't like it. He frequently mentioned my job as a distraction from school, but I knew why he disliked it. I wasn't around as much for him to critique. As I accumulated more money, the thought of moving out began to form in my head, but I realized it would not be easy. My mother and Tom were unable of dealing with the situation. The more I thought about it, the more it seemed like the only option to regain control of my life. I was a ball of worry the day I decided to inform them I was leaving. I discovered a basic yet fairly priced apartment near my campus. From my part-time employment, I had saved enough to cover the first 3 months' rent. It wasn't a lot, but it was mine. The prospect of having my own life and space kept me focused. One evening, after dinner, I seated Tom and Mom at the kitchen table. With my heart pumping, I attempted to keep my voice calm. I looked them in the eyes and said, "I'm moving out." The room became silent, and I could feel the tension mounting. You could have heard a pin drop. Tom was the first to reply. He smiled, shook his head and said, as if I had told him the most stupid thing imaginable, "You think you're ready to live on your own, just because of your age?" His voice was filled with amazement and a trace of mockery. At first, my mother said nothing. She simply sat there, staring down at the table, her expression unreadable. "I am ready," I said, attempting to sound more confident than I felt. The disagreement began when I stated that I needed my own room and had enough savings to cover it. Tom went on a rampage, accusing me. I was selfish, unappreciative, and tried to avoid my responsibilities at home. "He looks up to you, you know?" he continued, attempting to guilt me into leaving Nathan behind. As if that were enough to keep me in a hazardous atmosphere. My mother's response was calmer, but no less devastating. She did not dispute with me, like Tom did, nor did she attempt to stop me. She only continued to complain, saying things like, "Families stick together, and you'll regret it if you leave." But I knew better. This was not about family. It was about control. I stayed put not because I just desired my own space, but because I needed it for my emotional and psychological well-being. I felt like an outsider in my supposed home. I was tired of being held accountable for things beyond my control and of attempting to fit into a family that had made it apparent that I was not actually a member of it. I spent the following few days preparing. Every item I packed into a box felt like a step closer to independence, even though it wasn't easy. My mother entered my room on the morning I was supposed to leave. I readied myself for another battle, but it never happened. Instead, she helped me pack discreetly. Our conversation was brief. She asked whether I needed extra boxes or offered to donate old utensils. We both appeared to be avoiding the actual concerns, making light talk to avoid admitting that this was the end of something. Later that day, when I locked the door to my new flat, I experienced an uncommon range of feelings, including relief, grief, excitement, and worry. I was now living completely on my own. It felt simultaneously liberated and terrible. The first few nights were the most challenging. The flat seemed overwhelmingly empty and quiet. I found myself longing even the disagreeable sounds of home, like Jake's loud music, Nathan running around, and Tom's incessant nagging. However, as the days passed into weeks, I grew to cherish the silence. For the first time in years, I could actually breathe. I no longer had to tiptoe around the house, worrying about Tom's mood swings or whether Jake had hosted another party. I could come and go as I liked, eat when I wanted and sleep uninterrupted. It seemed like I was finally discovering who I was beyond the insanity of my family. A new type of freedom. Life rapidly found its groove. I balanced work, education, and maintaining my modest apartment. It was not flashy, but it was mine. My connection with my mother and Tom improved slightly after I moved out of their house. I kept my distance but saw them sometimes, which made things easier. Then, unexpectedly, I received a call from my mother. Her speech was muted and more light than normal. "Tom's been thinking about his will," she added, simply as if discussing the weather. "He wants to make sure everything is in order." I reacted hesitantly, not sure where this was going. After a pause, she said, "He has decided to include Jake and Nathan but not you. Because they are his biological children, he believes it is more rational." There it was. It stings. Although I hadn't expected much from Tom, seeing it stated so bluntly hurt me harder than I anticipated. It wasn't about the money, but about the message. The reminder that, despite all these years, I was still not regarded as a member of the family. I forced myself to answer neutrally. "I understand." Mom, maybe sensing the hurt, hastily attempted to ease the impact. "You understand, this is just legal things. It doesn't impact our feelings for you, right?" Even if I didn't believe her, I allowed the conversation to divert to other issues. But the harm was already done. That night I laid in bed, staring at the ceiling, with that familiar sense of not belonging gnawing at me. Part of me wanted to confront Tom, demand an explanation, or simply tell him how deeply it hurt. However, another part of me questioned the point. For years, that family had not felt like a part of me, so why should it matter now? I ultimately decided to back off. I reduced my visits, stayed busy with school and work, and spent more time cultivating relationships with people who actually appreciated me. Friends, instructors, and co-workers who loved me for who I was, not for what I could contribute or because we had once shared a home. These were the individuals that mattered. The anguish from Tom's will and years of feeling like an outsider began to recede. It wasn't an overnight metamorphosis, but the hatred subsided, though it would occasionally boil up, especially at family events, when I saw Jake and Nathan relishing in the spotlight. I began to realize that some things were beyond my control. I started establishing my own family and sense of belonging. A few months later, Tom recovered from his health scare and their lives resumed to normal. Then came the actual test. I was invited to a family dinner to celebrate Tom's recovery. I went out of responsibility, rather than choice. The evening was just as awkward as I expected. Tom talked about his recuperation. Everyone gushed about Nathan's newest academic accomplishments, and Jake boasted about a new job he had suddenly landed. I sat there relatively silent, and it was painfully obvious that I was the odd one out. However, this time it stung less. I had come to terms with my status in the family. I was the outsider, yet there were individuals in my life that cared for me for myself, not because of family obligations or shared DNA. I made an excuse about an early start and went after dinner. As I drove home, I felt a weight lifted from my shoulders. "I'm good," I told myself. "Really good." I dealt with the emotional impact, faced the truth of my situation, and emerged stronger and more confident in myself than ever before. For the first time in years I felt peaceful. But life had another surprise in store. Just when I thought I had finally achieved some calm and routine, everything turned upside down again. One afternoon, I got a call from a lawyer I'd never heard of. His tone was courteous and professional, but his voice had an almost apologetic aspect. "Am I speaking with Jessica Evans?" he inquired. "Yes, that's me," I explained, bewildered. "I'm calling about Margaret Evans, your great-aunt's estate," he explained, his tone slow and measured. "She passed away recently and named you as the sole beneficiary." For a little period I fell silent. I couldn't recall Aunt Margaret. She was one of those distant relatives you'd hear about but never actually knew. She didn't have any children, and I faintly remembered my father mentioning her once or twice as someone who had helped raise him. I hadn't seen her in years, possibly since I was a tiny child. And now I'm being informed she's left everything to me. "I'm sorry for your loss," the lawyer said, breaking the stillness. "She was a remarkable woman." Still absorbing his remarks, I blurted out a thank you. Then, half expecting it to be something simple, perhaps an old house or a few family heirlooms, I inquired, "Exactly what did she leave behind?" "Your great-aunt was quite well off," he said. "Over the years, she made some excellent investments. The estate contains various properties, a significant stock portfolio, and a trust fund worth approximately $3 million. My heart halted for a moment. I sat there gripping my phone thinking, why me? We weren't very close. When I was younger, I paid her a few trips, but our relationship was never genuinely strong. My mind could not fully grasp it. The attorney then stated, "She left a letter for you. I will forward it together with the other documents." He noted that she went into greater detail regarding her decision. After we hung up, I sat there staring at my phone, trying to make sense of everything. Why did Aunt Margaret chose me to inherit everything? I scarcely know her. Was this some kind of mistake? The next few days were spent meeting with the attorney, signing paperwork, and discovering exactly what I had inherited. There were houses, stocks, and personal stuff in addition to the money. Aunt Margaret's letter, however, impacted me deeply. In it, she stated that she had always appreciated my independence and saw in me a reflection of herself at my age. She described me as determined, self-sufficient and capable of creating a life on my own, qualities she thought she lacked when she was younger. She wanted to offer me the opportunity to spend her riches for something meaningful. It was overwhelming. Here was this relative I barely knew, who saw something in me that my own family hadn't noticed. She appreciated and chose me. My initial move was to purchase a tiny home. Though it wasn't lavish, it was mine and represented a new chapter in my life. Thinking about long-term financial security, I also bought a rental property and invested the leftover monies. I spoke with a financial expert to ensure that I made sound judgments. It seemed weird. In the course of a week, my life had entirely changed. I no longer had to scrape by or wonder how I would make ends meet. For the first time, I felt truly secure and free. However, freedom brought a new set of challenges. At first, I didn't notify anyone about the bequest, even my relatives. Given our tumultuous past, I knew the news would not be well received. I owe them nothing. But secrets have a way of getting out, and mine was no exception. It began with a cousin I hadn't seen in years, who heard about the inheritance through legal means. My mother found out before I did, and the rest of the family soon followed suit. The phone calls started almost immediately. First, my mother called in an unusually cheerful and inquisitive tone. She complimented me, then casually stated how difficult things had been financially for her and Tom. I sensed where the talk was going, and sure enough, the floodgates erupted. Tom called first, then Jake, and then some distant cousins I hadn't heard from in years. Each intimated, in their own way, that they needed a piece of my inheritance. Times are tough, they would say. My mother even commented, "You know how bad Tom's health has been," as if this explained their newfound interest in me. They all seemed to have forgotten about me, but only as a possible ATM. I was overwhelmed with requests for money, loans and gifts. It felt like vultures were circling, waiting for their time to swoop down. I felt overwhelmed. For a brief period, I considered quitting up, questioning whether holding on to the bequest was selfish. But then I remembered all the years I'd spent feeling like an outsider in my own family, being blamed, discarded and ignored. I had worked hard to earn whatever I had before this windfall. I had gotten it through college on my own without their help, and now that I had some stability, they wanted to take it away. When I was struggling, none of them volunteered to help. When my mother eventually inquired why I hadn't told her about the bequest sooner, I found the strength to reject the guilt and manipulation. I softly but firmly explained to her that our separation was both emotional and physical. I had been kept away, ignored, and alienated for years, as if I belonged nowhere in the family. This inheritance allowed me to live on my own, without relying on anybody else. It is my life, I assured her, and I must live it in my own manner. I apologize if this offends you, but right now I need to act in my best interests. The outcome of that conversation was worse than I could have predicted. Mom accused me of being arrogant and inconsiderate. Tom interjected, chastising me about how families should treat one another. Nonetheless, I stood my ground. Over time the calls got less frequent, and the demands for money ceased when they understood I would not give in. It was challenging, but extremely necessary. I had realized a sad reality about family. Sometimes the people you trust the most are the ones who bring you down. Knowing that I had protected myself brought me calm. Finally, I decided not to let them dictate my life. This inheritance was about taking control of my own destiny and, more importantly, gaining the ability to live my life on my own terms. My communication with them became strained, but I'd become accustomed to it. Their approval was no longer required, and I was not bound to offer them anything. I had friends, mentors, and people who actually cared about me, not because of familial obligations, but because of who I was. The big surprise came from an unexpected source. My younger half-brother, Nathan. I unexpectedly received a clumsy handwritten note from him. "I'm sorry for asking for money. I miss you," he wrote in his untidy handwriting. Though little, this step meant a lot to me. Nathan, barely 14, was reaching out in his own way. After that, we started texting. Little conversations about his school and interests, nothing too serious, but it was something. It was the start of a modest bridge between us, even though I wasn't optimistic about reconciling with the rest of the family. I was creating a life for myself, free of need on anyone else. For the first time in years I felt completely free. However, the impression of tranquility was fleeting. Just as I thought things had settled down, my mother contacted me again a few weeks after Nathan's letter. This time, she wished to talk things over. I could tell this wasn't going to be a chat about reconnecting or finding common ground, so I agreed to see her in public in the hopes of keeping things nice. We met at a nearby cafe and the vibe was unsettling from the start. She rarely inquired about my life or how I was doing. Instead, she got right into how difficult things had been financially since Tom's health crisis and how Nathan's private school fees were stacking up. I sat there, listening, feeling like an outsider in her list of troubles. It quickly became evident why she had requested to meet. She also added that they were thinking of upgrading the house and that she really needed a vacation to relieve her stress. It was clear she was not there to heal our relationship. She was there for a single reason. Finally, I could not stand it any longer. I cut through the tension, saying, "Mom, just get to the point." She looked me in the eye and said, without hesitation, "I expect you to write me a check for $1 million. I nearly choked on my coffee. "Excuse me?" I asked incredulously. She did not waver. "It is only fair. Technically, since it came from your father's side of the family, all of that money should have been mine." I was shocked. Her entitlement and audacity were astonishing. She sat there, casually demanding $1 million as if it was her birthright. I said bluntly, trying to keep my voice steady, "I'm not giving you $1 million. Her tone moved from entitled to plain angry, and her expression became severe. "You have always been unappreciative of everything we've done for you," she told us. Her remarks painted me as a criminal for not turning her the money she claimed she was owed. Without turning back, I paid the money and left the cafe. It still surprises me that my own mother attempted to guilt me into giving her money to which she had no right. What followed was even worse. A few days later, my mother started circulating rumors. She informed everybody who would listen that I had stolen the inheritance, saying it was rightfully hers, and accused me of hoarding it out of greed. Suddenly, relatives I hadn't heard from in years began calling, either to support her or to pressure me into sharing the money. The hypocrisy was staggering, especially given that Tom had omitted me from his own will because I wasn't family. Even Tom got involved, writing me a long guilt-ridden text about how I needed to consider the family and make more inclusive decisions. I reacted in a single sentence. "You didn't include me in your will because I'm not family, remember?" That shut him off for a while. But the drama did not end there. Things got heated when I received an official-looking letter in the mail. To my amazement, my mother was suing me. Yes, you read that correctly. She was suing me for a share of the inheritance, claiming that as my father's widow, she was entitled to a large amount of the money. I was stunned. Was my own mother dragging me to court? I could not believe it. At first I was afraid, expecting a protracted and costly court battle. I called my attorney, who laughed after reading the letter. "This is a joke," he remarked, flinging the letter away. "The will is airtight." He next investigated the so-called attorney who had sent the letter. The phone number was disconnected, and the address on the letterhead was for a decrepit building under construction. It became evident that my mother and Tom had engaged a dodgy, most certainly fraudulent lawyer in a last-ditch attempt to terrify me into paying them money. While I was happy that the lawsuit was unfounded, I was also terribly disappointed. Their willingness to go to such lengths for my inheritance was surprising. They had tried guilt-tripping and manipulating me, and now they were making direct legal threats. I was done attempting to salvage any sort of relationship with them. I understood I needed some distance. After the legal jitters passed, the emotional toll hit me hard. I was exhausted, sleep-deprived, and the constant drama was affecting my mental health. That was when I realized I needed a vacation from everything. We decided to take a road trip after talking with some of our friends. Nothing extravagant, just a trip to a couple spots we'd always wanted to go but never got around to. It was just what I needed. Time to clear my mind, escape the chaos, and, most importantly, consider what I wanted for my future. As we began the road, I couldn't help but reflect on how much had changed in such a little period. A year ago, I was barely making it in a house that never felt like home. I now had financial security, my own home, and the freedom to make my own judgments without interference from others. It felt liberating, yet also bittersweet. Growing up, I looked to my mother and stepfather for guidance and encouragement. To me, family meant having someone who would always have your back, no matter what. But through it all, I learned a terrible lesson. Just because someone is family by blood does not guarantee they are there for you in the ways that matter. Throughout the trip, I reflected a lot and realized that I didn't need their money, validation, or acceptance. I had everything I needed, and the relationships I actually valued were those I had formed with people who loved me for who I was, not what I could offer them. In little ways, my friends, colleagues, and even Nathan expressed more genuine care for me than my mother or Tom ever did. Following the trip, I decided to write letters to each family member who had attempted to influence me. I did it for me and not for others. It was my way of achieving closure, expressing what I couldn't say in the heat of the moment. In those letters, I detailed how their actions had harmed me and how, despite my desire to be a member of the family, I was constantly pushed aside. I wished them well and hoped they would move on, just as I had. The only reaction I received came from Nathan. His letter was modest but sincere. I appreciate you delivering the letter. I miss you. Let us get together sometime. It wasn't much, but it was the beginning. Nathan and I might one day develop something real, free of obligation or manipulation. As for the rest of the family, I had finally accepted that we were better off at a distance. The inheritance had served as a wake-up call. Not just a financial boon, but also a revelation about my true family. It wasn't the folks who raised me. It was those who supported me when I had nothing to offer but myself. Looking back, I don't have any regrets. I stayed firm, safeguarded my future and found peace by letting go of the poisonous connections that had been holding me back. Life has a peculiar way of teaching us what is actually essential, and I'm glad for that, no matter how harsh the lessons were. Sitting in my own home, surrounded by people who feel more like family than my actual relatives ever did, I know I'm precisely where I should be. Am I the asshole for cutting ties with my dad after years of being blamed for my mom's death and refusing to pay his rent? Since the day I was born, my life has been challenging. You see, my mother died in the hospital while giving birth to me. After that, I was raised by my father, who somehow held me, a physical baby, responsible for his wife's premature passing. Not a day went by during my upbringing in our home without my dad reminding me, in his own cruel manner, that I was the reason my mother disappeared. He would never stop telling me that he never truly wanted me and that my birth had taken away the person he loved the most. He would remind me that I had to work hard and live up to the enormous price my life had paid. If not, my mother's passing would have been pointless. Hearing those cruel remarks as a child was terrible, as you may understand. I was too young to completely comprehend the intricacies of wrath, sorrow, and sadness. I also needed my mother, but she was no longer with me, and the only parent I had left acted as though I were the issue. Instead of protecting me, guiding me, and providing me with comfort, my father became the one who never stopped reminding me that I was not welcome in his life and that my very presence was a curse. It was quite challenging to grow up in that setting. I frequently felt bad just for breathing and existing. At times, I longed to speak with him and express how wounded I was by his remarks and how they made me feel as though I didn't belong, even in my own house. But I didn't speak because of fear. I was greeted with greater resentment and rage the few times I tried to speak up. The outcome was a childhood characterized by a strong feeling of isolation and loneliness. I felt like I was always on edge, trying to prevent my dad from being even more resentful of me, while other children had parents that supported them, consoled them when they were depressed and made them feel comfortable. The existence of so much resentment and hate toward that aspect of myself that I couldn't alter, the mere fact that I was alive, was just as painful as the absence of love. I made an effort to comprehend my dad's suffering in spite of everything. I was aware that Dad had been devastated by the loss of my mother and that he had never really recovered. However, that didn't make it any simpler to live with the consequences of his statements. As a young child, I was attempting to figure out where I belonged in a world that frequently seemed unfriendly and chilly. I still secretly yearned for his acceptance, love and approval in spite of all the hurt. Despite everything, I always hoped to somehow make my dad proud. Every time I brought home a report card with decent scores, I recall the excitement I felt, hoping that perhaps this time would be different. Excited to show him what I had done, I would approach him in the hopes of receiving a grin or a supportive remark, anything that would give me the impression that I was enough in his eyes. However, it was always the same. He would groan, hardly look at my grades, and advise me to keep working harder at my studies because they were still not good enough. He would argue that it wasn't a huge deal because hundreds of other children could receive the grades I did. I was greeted with disinterest and a continual reminder that I wasn't living up to his standards rather than pride or satisfaction. For him, no matter how good I performed, it was never enough. I was affected by his disapproval in areas other than academics. Every time I wanted to engage in extracurricular activities with my friends or play sports, he would quickly put an end to it. I was informed that my studies were the only thing I needed to concentrate on in order to leave his house as quickly as possible. I was reminded by those hurtful remarks that I was not a child to be cherished and cared for, but rather a burden. I didn't have the same parental support as my peers, who would talk about how their parents pushed them to pursue their interests and cherish their youth. I was always reminded that I was only a visitor to his home and that I had to follow instructions or face expulsion. The weekends, which ought to have been spent unwinding or enjoying friends, were no exception. Even if all I wanted to do was go to the park or hang out at a friend's house, He would go on a tirade about how I was squandering his money if I ever asked to go out or spend time with my friends. He'd start a tirade about how hard he was working to pay for my education and how I had no right to squander time or money on friendships. It seemed like he instinctively judged anything that made me happy or gave me a sense of normalcy to be trivial or undesirable. His reaction to my 15th birthday stands out as one of the most agonizing memories I have. For me, it was a day of dread, yet most children anticipate their birthdays with joy, organizing parties or get-togethers with friends. He disliked me celebrating my birthdays every year, but I believed that year would be different. I wanted to get some pizza and watch a movie with my pals. He had a fuss when I eventually plucked up the nerve to approach him for money. He yelled at me, saying that since it was also the day my mother died, I had no right to enjoy the occasion. He made it plain to me that I should never even consider having a good time on my birthday since it would always be the worst day of the year for him. I never celebrated with my pals because of this. As you might guess, I eventually learned from all of these recurring situations that my dad obviously detested me and didn't want me around. I felt like I was always walking on thin ice, trying to avoid doing anything that would make him angry or disapprove, as a result of the incessant rejection and criticism. I gradually discovered how to keep my aspirations to myself. I knew it would only result in disappointment and hurt, so I stopped looking to him for encouragement or acceptance. In order to get out of my dad's house, I put all of my effort into achieving good marks and did my best to be strong for myself. I eventually saw the results of all the effort, tenacity, and resolve I put into my studies. I still recall the day I was accepted to a prestigious institution with a full scholarship. It was a mixture of pride and relief. At last, I was leaving the house, escaping my father's controlling influence and beginning a new phase of my life where I could live as I pleased. I felt as though a tremendous burden had been removed when I left home. I was genuinely free for the first time in my life. I had some of the best times of my life throughout those 4 years of college. It was a time of joy, progress, and self-discovery. I was able to experience all that had been out of my reach for so long and live like a typical young adult at last. Even though he made an effort to exert greater control over me from a distance, I stopped listening to my dad. I'd had enough of living under his rule. It was time for me to take charge of my life and create the life I want. Even with my newfound independence and the excitement of college life, I never lost sight of my objectives. I maintained my good marks because I was eager to take advantage of the chance I had worked so hard to obtain. However, I also made sure to have fun and take advantage of everything that college had to offer. I joined clubs, attended parties, made new friends, followed my interests, and at last began to live my life as I had always dreamed. I met Sheila, my girlfriend, about this time. One of the most amazing and surprising things that happened to me in college was meeting her. There was something about Sheila that captured my attention right away. We are both very similar in that we are driven, ambitious, and career-focused. Beyond that, though, our deeper connection was what truly set our relationship apart. No one else ever understood me the way Sheila did. The fact that we can sit together for hours on end without having to talk to each other is one of my favorite things about her. She lets me lose myself in my thoughts, which is really uncommon in relationships. I never feel under pressure to be someone else when I'm with Sheila. Whether we are sitting side by side, content in our solitude, or discussing our aspirations and ambitions, we appreciate each other's presence. For the first time in my life, Sheila gave me the genuine sense that I didn't need to bear the shame I had been carrying around for so long. She was able to see straight through the misery I had been experiencing. Pain that had grown so pervasive in my life that I was virtually blind to its abnormality. Sheila emphasized how terribly incorrect it was for my father to hold me responsible for my mother's passing and how no child should have to deal with that. She urged me to go to therapy, which I had never given much thought to before. I didn't even know there was a method to break free from my dad's influence because his words were so embedded in my brain. One of the things that changed my life the most was going to therapy. At first, it was difficult since it required a lot of bravery and work to face the truth about my childhood, admit the trauma I had experienced, and learn how to destroy the harmful ideas I had internalized. However, therapy let me see things that nothing else had. It made it clear to me how faulty my dad's reasoning was and how much I was worthy of better. I gradually came to understand that my dad's resentment and rage were his problems, not mine, and that I wasn't responsible for my mother's passing. I saw that my anger toward my dad increased as I began to recover. It seemed as though all of the bitterness I had been harboring was at last emerging. For years, I had been carrying the guilt he had placed on me while attempting to gain his favor and be the child he desired me to be. However, I was now coming to the realization that I had nothing to do with that and that he had unfairly and cruelly burdened me with his rage and anguish. I found it challenging to keep up any sort of contact with him during my time in college because of this rage. I rarely spoke with him, and when I did, it was tense and brief. I couldn't help but be resentful when I yelled at him, and I wasn't very patient when he tried to manipulate or be critical of me. I finally confronted him about everything at one point. It was a spontaneous outburst of repressed emotion and frustration rather than anything I had planned. I explained to him how his words and deeds had severely damaged my mental health throughout the years he had held me responsible for my mother's passing, and how I was determined to stop him from doing that to me. I made it plain that I was tired of being used as a scapegoat and that I was entitled to dignity and respect. If not, I would sever my relationship with him forever. This time he had nothing to say. I had thought that he would apologize, but he didn't refute what I had said either. I observed a shift in my dad's interactions with me following that talk. Every time he spoke to me, he seemed to attempt to be kinder and less severe. He seemed to be trying to change, to be more sensitive to my emotions. However, our relationship remained tense in spite of this. A minor change in behavior was not enough to undo years of suffering and animosity. Although I was grateful for his attempt, it would take more than that to mend the relationship, if it could be restored at all, given the harm he had caused. Even while my connection with my dad remained strained over the years, I no longer felt the same kind of shame or rage. I've gradually realized that although I can't alter the past, I can manage how I allow it to impact the future. Sheila's encouragement and support have undoubtedly been crucial to this journey, and I am immensely appreciative of her for assisting me in realizing my worth as a person deserving of respect, love, and happiness. My dad recently married DEI, his lover. I chose to go to the modest private wedding with my girlfriend Sheila, in spite of everything that had transpired between us over the years. As they embarked on this new phase of their lives together, we wanted to offer our support and best wishes. I was pleased for my father and believed that he may improve as a result of getting married. But my dad called me a month after they were married, seeming desperate. He was having financial difficulties as a result of some bad financial decisions. He informed me that he was facing eviction after failing to pay his rent for the previous 6 months. He claimed that he couldn't discuss this with his wife since it would cause them to argue. He asked me if I could pay his rent right now. As soon as I heard this, I declined. Given our complex past, I didn't want to be used as a financial safety net, even if I had the resources to do so. I didn't want to create a situation where he could come to me for financial support if things went wrong because I've worked hard to create the life I have. However, I began to feel bad after discussing it with Sheila. I couldn't get rid of the thought that perhaps I was being too severe, that perhaps he really needed assistance, and that he was still my father in spite of everything. I then gave my dad a call back and suggested a middle ground. I informed him that since I lived alone in my house and had enough room for him and DEI, I would let them to remain with me temporarily even if I wasn't willing to pay his rent. Until they saved enough money to get back on their feet and locate a new place, I offered them they could stay at my house. Considering everything that had transpired between us in the past, it wasn't an easy decision, but I believed it was the right one. I made it apparent that this was only a short-term solution and that I wanted him to put in the effort to get back on his feet. After considering my offer for a while, my dad finally gave me a call and accepted the deal. He and DEI moved in with me in 2 weeks, and I prepared a guest room for them. For us all, the first month or two was a time of transition. I hadn't lived with my dad for years, and we had changed significantly since then. I was no longer the adolescent who had to put up with his remarks in silence. I had my own life, rituals, and habits as an adult. Unfortunately, his previous patterns quickly reappeared. As though nothing had changed, my dad began making remarks about my habits and manner of life, including how I spent my time, maintained the house, and even handled my daily tasks. He seemed to have something to say all the time. However, I had changed from who I was before. I wasn't going to give him that much control over me this time. Every time he began to criticize me or try to dictate how I lived my life, I would tell him to stop. I would make it plain that, particularly while residing under my roof, he had no right to criticize my decisions. I was forceful, but I wasn't impolite. I refused to let him tell me how I should live any longer. Naturally, his wife, Dee, was not pleased with this. She said a few of times that I should respect my father. She would explain to me how much he had given up. Since I knew the truth about him and she obviously didn't know about half of the things he had done to me as a youngster, I would just shake my head. Although I respected my father, I wasn't going to let him control me or override my decisions. I wasn't going to repeat the cycle of sacrificing my happiness to satisfy my father, something I had done for far too long. Nevertheless, I would simply remain silent any time DEI made those comments because it wasn't my place to tell her the truth about my dad. There was no point in arguing about it. Although I was aware that cohabitation would be difficult, I thought that eventually we could all figure out how to get along without too much conflict. However, one evening after a particularly demanding workday, I returned home to discover my dad and his wife watching TV in the living room. The kitchen was overflowing with dishes, and the house was a complete disaster. Since I had frequently reminded my dad and his wife that they needed to do their fair share of the housework and that it was his day to clean, I questioned him about why he hadn't done it. "You know," Dad began in that tone that always made me tense, "you're a grown-up who I raised all by myself after your mother died. Asking me to perform additional work for you at this age should make you feel embarrassed. You're capable of doing the dishwashing yourself." Hearing such statements infuriated me so much that I retorted, "You know what's truly embarrassing? The fact that you were the one who pleaded with me to move in for free. And now you're sitting here on my couch, in my home, eating my food, watching my TV and giving me directions. This entire time, neither you nor your wife have offered me any assistance. You know what? You can just pack your bags and depart at any time if you don't feel like doing the dishes." My father simply looked at me, surprised by how strongly I had responded. For an instant I feared he may actually stand up and storm out of the tense quiet. But knowing that he had nowhere to go, I turned and left the room, slamming the kitchen door behind me as my heart raced with impatience and rage. When I came downstairs the following morning, DEI and I were by ourselves in the kitchen. It's likely that my dad left early for work. DEI asked if she could speak with me as I was ready to leave the kitchen. I decided to sit down and listen even though I wasn't totally sure what to anticipate. DEI looked serious as she started to explain to me how upset my dad was following our talk the night before. She claimed that given the amount of money he had allegedly spent to assist me in purchasing my home, I had no right to treat him in that manner. My dad hadn't provided me with any financial support since I left for college, so I was understandably shocked. I had saved hard for years to purchase this house with my own funds. The assertion that he had made a substantial contribution to my acquisition was wholly untrue. When I asked DEI what she meant, she clarified that my dad had told her that he had contributed to my property purchase by using some of his savings. It seemed almost funny to me that this was the story my dad had given her, and it was like a light bulb going out. DEI persisted in saying that I should be thankful for the assistance my dad had allegedly provided me before I could reply. She believed that since he was having financial difficulties, it was only right that I begin paying him back some of that money by housing them while they were living with me. She argued that since this was essentially my dad's house as well, it was the least I could do in light of the alleged financial sacrifices my dad had made for me. I couldn't help but giggle at DEI as I continued to stare at her face. I mean, I couldn't take it seriously because it was all so ridiculous. When I eventually stopped laughing, I told her the truth. My dad hadn't paid $1 and I was the real owner of the house. Her expression was priceless. She was obviously unaware that I was the owner of the house, and she must have been overcome with shame and rage. In response to her question about whether or not my dad had ever assisted me, I explained that he didn't even have enough money to cover his own rent, so how could he ever afford to buy my house? She didn't protest much after our conversation, so I assume she saw the truth too. Shortly thereafter though, she gathered her belongings and departed from my home that same day. Since it was none of my business, I didn't stop her. When my dad returned home later that night, he contacted DEI and asked her why her belongings were gone. He began blaming me for speaking out after he learned that I had told her the truth about who owned the house. He claimed that by disclosing the truth, I purposefully ruined his marriage and caused his wife discomfort. He claims that since he now felt inferior to me and that it was somehow my responsibility that he couldn't afford a house of his own, I ought to have been more understanding and allowed her to believe his lie. It was unbelievably frustrating. I made it clear to him that I was offering them my house in order to help them, and instead of receiving appreciation, I was being held responsible for their issues. My dad seemed to have forgotten that I owed him nothing and that he was the only one at fault in this situation. Even as an adult, he was attempting to use me as a scapegoat for something that wasn't my fault, as if all the years of him treating me like I was the issue had suddenly returned. He refused to listen though. He didn't see my point of view and demanded that I call DEI to apologize and make things right by lying, giving her the impression that he had assisted me in some way when I bought this place. I said that I would not tell his wife a falsehood on his behalf. The continual manipulation and finger-pointing had worn me out, and I had had enough. My mental health was beginning to suffer as a result of my dad's continual arguments with me, so I finally told him that I could no longer bear his presence. I requested that he get his belongings and vacate by the next day. I took the painful decision, but in order to preserve my own tranquility and sanity, I had to set and uphold boundaries. My dad argued that he had nowhere to go and begged for more time, but I was too upset at the time to give a damn about his predicament or his justifications. The following morning, I enforced my choice and forced my dad to vacate. Since DEI won't talk to him, my dad has been contacting me to whine about how I have destroyed his marriage and his life. He claims that a good son would never have ejected their parents and continuously blaming me for DEI's current situation. Update 1. I'm relieved that everyone is aware of the immense trauma my dad has caused me over the years. Many people have suggested that I get in touch with DEI and tell her the truth about my early years because she could not be completely aware of my dad's true identity. I've stayed out in his affairs up until now, but I think it's crucial that she understands the truth because he may have misled her about other matters. I'm going to get in touch with her and speak with her directly. Update 2. A week has passed since my last update. DEI and I finally got a chance to sit down and talk about everything. As it happens, she was unaware of the type of upbringing I experienced. I told her about my emotional trauma, blame, and the effects it had on me. She appeared astonished and acknowledged that Dad had presented a very different image of himself, suggesting that he was a struggling single parent who had given up everything for his child. I was so shocked that I had to shake my head. I told tales of my early years and how I was always held responsible for my mother's death. She conveyed her understanding and concern. I then told her how fortunate I was to get a well-paying career and how hard I had fought to establish myself during college. I was able to move into my own place and save money as a result. I explained to her that I didn't enjoy my father controlling everything around my house because, as a child, he never let me be who I was. DEI recognized my suffering. She then disclosed that Dad had lost all of his money as a result of gambling, and she hadn't told me about it before as he wanted to hide it and was too embarrassed about it. She clarified that she had flatly rejected my dad's initial offer to move in with me. She didn't feel comfortable living with me, so I suppose that's why my dad lied to her and said that he had helped pay for my house, which made her feel less bad about accepting the offer to remain with us. She was upset though, when she subsequently learned from me that his claims of helping with my house were completely false and really another ploy to achieve what he wanted. She went on to express her embarrassment at having to ask me for rent that day. I informed her that Dad was solely responsible for his falsehoods and that it wasn't her fault. DEI told me as we were leaving that she intended to take some time away from Dad to think about their relationship after our talk. Update 3. Hello everyone. I am aware that it has been 3 months since I last made any updates to this page. Since I requested my dad to move out, I have severed all ties with him. Although it hasn't been a simple decision, it is essential for my emotional and mental well-being. He tried to point the finger at me for everything the last time we spoke, but I stopped talking to him. I simply blocked him right away. I must say that I've been feeling a lot better ever since. I feel relieved and more clear-headed now that the pressure and manipulation have subsided. I feel as though my privacy and tranquility have finally returned. Sheila, my girlfriend, has been really helpful during this process. She has supported me, helped me process my feelings, and offered consolation and encouragement. Her assistance has had a significant impact, and I am truly appreciative of her. I'm gradually discovering a new sense of security and contentment now that my dad is no longer involved and Sheila is by my side. I'm concentrating on creating the life I desire, working for my objectives, and appreciating the good things in my relationship. My best friend abandoned her baby with me, now she's back to take her for a trust fund inheritance after her mother-in-law's death. We were freshmen at State University in 2013, which is when I first met Penelope, 29F. Our first encounter occurred when she wanted to borrow my notes after missing class due to the flu. We were both majoring in computer science. Following that, we began attending lectures together and eventually found ourselves in the same study group. We had a close-knit group of friends during our first 2 years of college. 6 of us would get together every Friday to study in the campus coffee shop before going to the neighborhood pizza place for dinner. Because Penelope and I were both only kids from middle-class households attempting to succeed in the computer industry, we grew particularly close. Both of us found employment in the same city after graduating in 2017. She found a job at a startup about 20 minutes away, and I worked at a software business downtown. We maintained frequent communication, getting together for lunch on Wednesdays and spending weekends with other local college pals. Penelope began dating Mike, a sales representative for her employer, around the end of 2019. I never really liked him. Even if he first appeared fine. He would frequently arrive late to group gatherings or abruptly cancel plans with Penelope. He ended their relationship by text message after roughly 6 months of dating. Penelope called me in tears 2 weeks after the separation to tell me she was expecting a child. Mike quickly blocked her number and moved to his company's office in a different state after she told him. It was very apparent that he had no interest in the infant. Penelope had my support during her pregnancy. I became her primary support system because her parents resided in Florida and could only visit periodically. I assisted her in shopping for baby goods, attended all of her doctor's appointments, and even watched YouTube videos to learn how to assemble a cot. The birth date of Emily was March 15, 2021. Due to inclement weather, Penelope's parents' travel was delayed, so I was in the birth room. I saw how difficult it was for Penelope to connect with Emily during those initial days in the hospital. Penelope was aloof despite the nurses' attempts to assist her with nursing and basic baby care. I began visiting Penelope's apartment every day after work when they returned home. I would prepare dinner, assist Emily, and frequently remain until 11 o'clock or later. I would take Emily for a little while on the weekends so Penelope could get some rest or sleep. With a crib, changing table, and more baby items than I ever imagined having, my apartment turned into a second nursery. When Emily was about 6 months old, the issues began to worsen. Penelope would phone me in the middle of the night to tell me that Emily's crying was too much for her to handle. Occasionally, when I got there, Emily would be crying in her crib and Penelope would be sitting on the couch. Penelope began skipping work a lot and hardly ever left her apartment. Penelope was let go by her employer in January of 2022. She started skipping work without warning after using up all of her sick days. Things truly took a turn for the worst at that point. She stopped taking calls from relatives and friends. Unwashed laundry was all around her flat, and unclean dishes were piled up. At 3 a.m. on February 12, 2022, Penelope gave me a call. I could hardly understand her since she was crying so much. She claimed Emily deserved more and that she was a bad mother. She pleaded with me to let Emily stay for a few days so she could get her act together. I was concerned about both of them, so I agreed. The following morning, Penelope delivered Emily to my flat along with 3 big bags of supplies and clothing. After giving Emily a deep embrace, she hurried off, promising to call Emily shortly. At the time, Emily was 10 months old. Penelope texted Emily every day throughout the first week to inquire about her. She wanted to know if Emily missed her, if she was eating well, and if she was sleeping well. Every time I replied with pictures and updates. Her texts decreased in frequency and length throughout the second week. By the third week, when I asked her when she would return, she would only respond with a single word. A month later, she stopped answering altogether. I made every effort to get in touch with her. She had moved out when I tried to reach her via phone, text, email, and even in person at her apartment. She hadn't contacted her parents either. Despite my worries, I had to concentrate on Emily. I hired a part-time nanny to assist during video conferences and changed my work schedule to spend more time at home. Emily fared remarkably well. She was a cheerful baby all the time, and it seemed like having a regular routine helped. At about this time, she began referring to me as Dada. I initially attempted to correct her, but my mother claimed that since I was her primary caregiver, it was only normal. I got a certified letter from a law firm 3 months after Penelope left. In the legal forms in the packet, Penelope was asking me to adopt Emily and renounce her parental rights. In a brief letter, she expressed her inability to become a mother and her belief that Emily would live a better life with me. I contacted a family lawyer right away to manage the adoption procedure. The lawyer stated that adoption was feasible because I had been Emily's primary caregiver for months and Penelope was voluntarily renouncing her rights. We had to conduct background checks, have social workers visit homes, and post notices in newspapers. Emily officially became my daughter on September 15, 2022 after a 4-month process. After that, life settled into a comfortable pattern. In order to be more accessible, I made the decision to work from home permanently. 3 days a week, Emily began attending a local preschool, which she adored. Her professors praised her for being well-adjusted and gregarious, and she made friends easily. Every month my parents travel from Ohio to visit us. They showered Emily with gifts and attention, embracing their role as grandparents. Every time Penelope's parents call to see how Emily is doing, I send them pictures and updates. They never put any pressure on me regarding Penelope since they understand that I am now Emily's father. As a single father, dating has been fascinating. I usually scare women away right away or pique their curiosity because I'm always honest about having a daughter. Emily is my top priority, and I won't compromise on that. As a result, my 2 romances, each lasting a few months, terminated. Up until last week, everything was good. A knock on the door interrupted my work in my home office. Emily was enrolled in preschool. Penelope was standing there when I opened the door, and she didn't look at all like I remembered her. She appeared healthy, had well-groomed hair, and wore pricey clothing. She said that she had received assistance and was now prepared to become a mother. She had been attending therapy and was doing well as a project manager. Her goal was to regain custody and begin dating Emily. Since she had revoked her rights and I had legally adopted Emily, I informed her that was not feasible. She broke down in tears, admitting that she had erred and that her despair had prevented her from thinking clearly at the time. She became irate and threatened to get a lawyer when I refused to back down. She promised to provide evidence that she was forced to renounce her rights. I instructed her to get out and that my lawyer would have to handle any correspondence. I'm worried now. Emily is content, safe and thriving in our life together. She has no memory of Penelope. I had to share this somewhere, but I've already phoned my lawyer to be ready for whatever Penelope might try. I will not allow anyone to take my kid away. Update 1. Since I last posted, a lot has transpired. Penelope sued, saying she had terminated her rights when untreated postpartum depression was plaguing her. A 15-page affidavit from her attorney described how I allegedly exploited her mental state to remove Emily from her. The text exchanges from 2021 to 2022 that were contained in the dossier showed Penelope requesting my assistance with Emily. Even back then, her lawyer misrepresented these messages to suggest that I was attempting to become Emily's mom. They also claimed that I had been preparing to obtain custody all along because I had baby goods at my apartment. After Penelope reached out to our former college pals, they became interested. I stole Penelope's baby, according to some of their Facebook posts. Our study group member Tom called me and told me that I should realize that Penelope was ill when she gave up Emily. After I'd declined to talk about letting Penelope see Emily, Lisa, another college acquaintance, blocked me on all social media. However, not everyone took Penelope's side. In a lengthy Facebook post, my friend Mark, who had frequently assisted me with Emily, described how Penelope had utterly abandoned Emily and disregarded all of my attempts to get in touch with her. He provided screenshots of our attempts to contact her that went unanswered. Emily's preschool has been in a tense situation. The director called me last Tuesday to let me know that Penelope had been keeping an eye on Emily while they were playing outside. She claimed to be Emily's mother and the right to see her from the personnel. She gave them old pictures of herself with baby Emily when they asked for identification. She refused to leave when the school security guard urged her to. She initially insisted that all she wanted was to see her daughter. Before she departed, they had to threaten to contact the police. I had to leave work early to pick up Emily after the director phoned me right away. The following day, I was at the school for 3 hours, updating all of Emily's documents. I provided them with copies of the court orders proving my sole custody and the adoption documents. I made it plain that no one else could pick Emily up, but I did add my parents to the pickup list. They changed their security procedures and now verify everyone's identity, even their known parents. Penelope began delivering parcels to our home. The first one, a big box filled with new toys, clothing, and a plush pink elephant arrived last Wednesday. She sent a lengthy letter outlining her reasons for leaving and her deep regret. She put notes on the back of each picture and included pictures of herself with Emily when she was a newborn. Over the course of the following week, 3 additional shipments came. One had children's books that contained private notes. A handcrafted photo album of Emily's first few months was in another. The final one has a tablet with videos of Penelope reading bedtime tales already loaded on it. Emily hasn't seen any of it, but I'm keeping it all as proof. Last Friday, Mrs. Chen, my next-door neighbor, called to report that someone had been parked outside our house for a number of hours. I noticed Penelope's white Honda Civic when I looked. She left before the cops arrived, even though I had contacted them. Although they filed a report, the police stated that they were powerless to take any action until she threatened us or made direct contact. I discovered a message in our mailbox 2 days ago. Penelope noted that in order to give Emily afternoons free, she had adjusted her work schedule. She provided a thorough plan outlining how she intended to begin with monitored visits before progressively moving on to overnight stays. I will continue to fight until I get my daughter back, she said at the end of the note. Emily has begun to ask questions that I find difficult to respond to. At school, she noticed Penelope observing her and inquired about the identity of the woman. Emily continually brings up the fact that I used to know her, even after I told her. Emily inquired yesterday if the woman would take her away. She no longer wants to attend school and has grown needy. My parents offered to let us spend some time with them in Ohio. It would be safer for them to reside in a guarded community. I thought about it, but moving would require removing Emily from her friends and school. She already has enough stress and adjustments to handle. When they learned of what was going on, Penelope's parents gave me a call. The way Penelope behaved appalled them. After leaving Emily, Penelope also stopped communicating with them, according to her mother. They searched but were unable to locate her. 6 months ago, she contacted them to inform them not to get in touch with me any longer. That was the first time they heard from her. According to my attorney, we have a compelling case. The adoption was completed correctly, including all necessary waiting periods and notices. Throughout the process, Penelope had her own attorney and willingly signed all the documents. He cautioned though that Penelope's attorney might attempt to drag this out in the hopes that I would consent to shared custody in order to put an end to the legal dispute. The expenses are mounting quickly. My attorney thinks that if this gets to trial, the $5,000 in legal fees I've already paid could increase significantly. Even though I'm fortunate to have savings, it's still difficult. I don't want this situation to become any more public than it currently is, but several folks recommended creating a GoFundMe. I'm recording everything for the time being, including every shipment, every school appearance, and every unwelcome contact. I placed security cameras all around our home and recorded Penelope passing by. I also started recording a thorough vlog of Emily's symptoms, including her queries, behavioral changes, and nightmares. Observing Emily's fear and confusion is the most difficult aspect. Every time someone knocked, she used to dash to the door. She is now hiding in her room. She constantly asks me to swear that I won't abandon her the way her last mother did. I had no idea that she was aware that Penelope was her other mother. She must have heard something in school, I suppose. I want this to stop, yet I refuse to comply with Penelope's demands. Emily is my daughter, and she has known me for the majority of her life as her only father. If someone decides they want to have children right away, I won't allow them to ruin her life. Update 2. Penelope's unexpected interest in Emily can be explained by something significant I learned about her. I received a Facebook message from Rachel, a nurse who used to work with Penelope at her previous hospital employment. She informed me that Penelope is now married to a wealthy Boston businessman and had another child 6 months ago. I received screenshots of Penelope's picture-perfect life from Rachel's private social media sites. She publishes pictures of her new baby boy, writes about charitable activities, and resides in a big house in a wealthy suburb. She discusses how parenthood transformed her life and the pleasures of being a first-time mother in each post. As Penelope's supervisor, Rachel had access to Penelope's old work emails, which contained the most crucial information. Penelope talked about her mother-in-law's final illness and a family trust fund that would be given to all of her grandkids upon her passing in these emails from 8 months ago. My lawyer did additional research and discovered more information. Last year, Penelope wed Robert Anderson. In Massachusetts, his family operates a series of upscale auto dealerships. Robert and his whole family were informed by Penelope that she had never been married or had children. For more than a year, she has been sharing on social media about her first experiences with parenthood and her new daughter. We also learned that precisely 1 week after Robert's mother passed away, Penelope began her custody battle. Penelope's mother-in-law left a multi-million-dollar trust fund, designated only for her biological grandkids. Each grandchild receives an equal share at turning 25 in accordance with the conditions of the trust. Things began to make sense when the time frame was reviewed. 2 weeks before her mother-in-law's passing, Penelope started passing our house on her way home. Only a few days after the death, the custody lawsuit was filed. She wants Emily to inherit anything, but she isn't attempting to get Emily back because she wants to become a mother. Rachel sent us Penelope's text chats with her friend Kate, which contained the most unsettling evidence. Penelope noted that she had to bring Emily back before the specifics of the trust money were decided. She discussed how she could explain Emily's existence to Robert by claiming that she had previously been too embarrassed to do so. She even intended to claim that while she was starting her career, she had temporarily placed Emily in my care. My attorney presented all of this evidence to Penelope's attorney. Then, with both attorneys present, Penelope asked for a private meeting. She revealed everything during the meeting. She claimed that although she felt bad about parting with Emily, she hadn't considered doing so until she found out about the trust fund. She believed she could use the inheritance money to make one for her past transgressions and provide Emily with a better life. Finding out that Penelope had hired a private investigator to follow us 3 months prior, long before she arrived at our door, was what really infuriated me. The PI collected data about our daily schedule and took pictures of Emily at school. Penelope knew just when to visit our home and when to get Emily up from school because of this. Emily is feeling the effects of the situation. She now pulls her blanket into my room every night instead of sleeping in her own room. I discovered her attempting to fit her favorite toys into her school backpack last week. She told me that she wanted to be prepared in case she had to go like her old mom did when I questioned why. At school, she overheard children discussing how the woman observing them was someone's mother who had left. I concluded that Emily needed expert assistance to handle this circumstance. I discovered a child psychologist who focuses on custody and adoption matters. So far, we've had 2 sessions. According to the psychologist, Emily is exhibiting symptoms of anxiousness, but she believes that with steady support and stability, she will be all right. Through all of this, Penelope's parents have been unexpectedly supportive. All of Penelope's emails and communications throughout the years, including ones in which she expressly stated that she would never want to see Emily again, were forwarded to me. They also gave a statement explaining how, after leaving Emily, Penelope stopped communicating with them and refused their assistance. Next month is the scheduled court date. With all of the fresh information on Penelope's actual intentions, my lawyer is really optimistic about our case. In order to prevent Penelope from seeing Emily or me, he is submitting a motion for a permanent restraining order. My parents helped me pay for the more than $12,000 in legal bills I've incurred over the past month. They stated that rather than risk losing their granddaughter, they would choose to spend their retirement funds now. I don't know if I could have fought this war alone, therefore I'm thankful for their support. Update 3. Last Monday, the legal case came to a close. When all of the court records and evidence were provided to Robert anonymously, Penelope's scheme fell apart. He attended the last hearing and discovered the whole truth about Penelope's history and current behavior. The judge examined all of the evidence for 4 hours. The text messages revealing Penelope's scheme to claim the trust fund funds piqued her curiosity the most. In addition, Penelope's hired private investigator testified that she had paid him to follow us months before she even tried to get in touch with Emily. During his testimony, Robert described how Penelope had deceived him and his family for 2 years. He disclosed that, on the grounds that she wants to adopt underprivileged children in the future, Penelope had pushed him to amend the terms of his mother's trust fund to include adopted children. Penelope began her scheme to reclaim custody of Emily after his mother refused. The judge's decision was unambiguous. She gave me a permanent restraining order and dismissed Penelope's custody petition. Penelope cannot approach Emily, me, our house, or Emily's school within 1,000 feet. Additionally, she is prohibited from mailing messages or packages, even via intermediaries. Any infraction will result in an arrest right away. Robert informed me following the hearing that he had already sought full custody of their son and filed for divorce. He discovered proof that Penelope had been financing her custody dispute with funds and resources from his business. She had paid the private investigator and attorneys more than $330,000 of their combined savings. When her manager discovered that Penelope had been using company time and computers to monitor us and plot her custody battle, she lost her job at the investment firm where she was employed. Her parents decided to take her in only after she began intense therapy, so she returned to Florida to live with them. About 30 minutes away from our previous home, we moved to a new one. Although it's in a different school district, my office is really closer to it. Last month, Emily began attending her new school. The principal is fully aware of our predicament and the school has outstanding security precautions. In her class, Emily has already met 3 new pals. I was able to explain everything to Emily in an age-appropriate manner with the assistance of the child psychologist. She picked me to be her father when we informed her that Penelope, her original mother, was unable to care for her. I was finally able to reassure Emily that no one would ever take her away when she questioned whether Penelope would take her away. Although Emily still occasionally sleeps in my room, the nightmares have largely ended. Her new teacher reports that she is adjusting well and that she is once again being her happy self at school. To make her feel more at ease in the new home, she sketched a portrait of our family last week, which only included her, me and our acquired pooch Max. Emily continues to get birthday and Christmas gifts from Penelope's parents. They just ever email me to see how she's doing and respect our boundaries. They have always been supportive of my adoption of Emily, so I send them pictures and updates every few months. I had to pay almost $40,000 in legal expenses for the entire thing, but it was well worth it to keep Emily safe. Last month, I received a promotion from my company, which aids in the financial recuperation. More significantly, we may now enjoy our lives without worrying about what others are doing. We are grateful to everyone who helped us get through this. No one can ever again question that Emily is my daughter in any meaningful manner. We're together, content and secure. That is all that is important. My sister can't have kids, and now my brother-in-law is stalking me because I refuse to be a surrogate to have a child with their DNA. My sister is identical to me, 30F. For the purposes of this narrative, we will refer to her as Stacy. Our father reared us after our mother tragically died during childbirth. I've been seeing Mike for the past 3 years, while Stacy has been married to Jeff for 8 years. My sister's desire to become a mother is something I've always known about her. She was constantly coming up with ideas for weddings, nursery themes, baby names, etc., even when we were kids. I was always more interested in reading and enjoying yourself. I'm currently working as a flight attendant and trying to have my writing published. My sister has never held a job. To be honest, we enrolled in college right away after high school. After graduating from college, she became a stay-at-home girlfriend to her fiancé, whom she eventually married. I've been aware for some time that my sister has been making fruitless attempts to conceive. Despite spending thousands of dollars on IVF and pretty much everything they could try because she wanted to experience pregnancy, she has had one miscarriage and has not been able to conceive again. They have begun to talk about other choices after 5 years of failure. My sister is keen about having a child that has both of their DNA, her words, not mine, and is not interested in adoption. She visited my place around 3 weeks ago and we were simply chatting and watching Modern Family as normal. She told me she needed to ask me an important question while she still had the courage. She asked if I could be her surrogate, which made me nervous. After a moment of inaction, I asked her what she meant. She said that she needed me to be her surrogate since I understood what a surrogacy meant. She was aware, I said, that I had no desire to have children. I'll be honest and say that I have never found the idea of having children appealing in any way, however this may be because of how we were born. I informed her that although I could not bear her child, I would have no problem giving her my eggs, no matter how many she needed. She was furious when she heard that. She was screaming that it's clear how envious and spiteful I am because this is a simple work. Her cheeks flushed. She had always mentioned having more than 4 children, but I didn't want to bring it up. Would I be expected to do this each and every time? I'm beginning to feel terrible, and I'm not sure. In the end, she told me that I could never be her sister if I couldn't do this one thing for her. She rushed out after smashing a photo of us that I had on my mantle. Since then, she has only sent me images of her vision boards and diaries from when we were children, claiming that I'm preventing her from starting a family pointlessly and that I should see the wider picture. Because it's such a sensitive topic, my boyfriend doesn't feel comfortable trying to influence me in either direction and won't give me advice, claiming that it belongs to my sister. Sincerely, this is the longest period of time I have ever gone without speaking to my sister, and I'm so close to caving in. Is it incorrect of me to refuse to act as my sister's surrogate? Edit, As I read over all of the comments, I would like to express my gratitude. Knowing that I am not the villain makes me feel so much better, but I would be lying if I claimed that I am not inclined to just do it. I can't articulate how much this distance from my sister makes me feel, but I see too many questions that I want to respond to in the hopes of receiving other answers. Money. My mother's death was caused by a provider error rather than natural causes. My sister and I don't have to worry about money because we have substantial trust from the money my father used to fight the hospital. Not working for 9 months or having to pay for the egg retrieval procedure, etc., is not a problem at all because her spouse is also financially secure. The fact that the baby shares our DNA and that one of us is carrying it because we are identical is more a result of her stubbornness. How can I conceive if she can't? We were involved in an automobile accident that prevented her from becoming pregnant and caused her to miscarry. She and our father received the brunt of the collision because they were in the front seat. She has experienced severe difficulties with egg retrieval, and regrettably, her body is no longer capable of bearing a kid. I don't know exactly how that went wrong, but I do know that it isn't working and isn't an option. Getting her to talk about non-viable choices so I can better grasp them is difficult. I don't have a child, so doctors won't let me be a surrogate. I greatly appreciate your knowledge. We always watch football with our dads and significant others, so this Thursday we're having a family supper. If she chooses to go, this subject will undoubtedly come up. Update 1. 2 days later. I promised to give you an update tomorrow, but last night, while I was hanging out, my dad called and invited me over for supper so we could talk. I want to start by expressing my gratitude for all of the advice and comments. Not only were some of you rude to me, but also to my sister and boyfriend. I still value the assistance. When my dad called, I assumed he had spoken to Stacy, so I didn't even inquire what it was about. I know you guys won't be pleased based on the responses, but I asked my partner where he thought he would be if I went forward with it. He assured me that he loved me and would be there for me no matter what, but he would not stand by and watch while my sister treated me like garbage if I was acting in this way under duress. I genuinely fully understand his statement that he wouldn't be able to support me. My sister and brother-in-law were already at my dad's when we arrived for dinner. When we walked in, I spoke to both of them, but only my sister answered. My brother-in-law met my partner alone and gave me the most repulsive look. There was an uneasy stillness and tension that might have been sliced with a butcher knife when my dad seated us down at the table. "Somebody talk," he said. "This has to be fixed before tomorrow night's game." My dad is a huge football fan, haha. I began by informing her that I had done some research and that, in addition to my original worries, I now had a few more and needed to know precisely what she needed from me. I started by asking her what it would be like to be a surrogate. "Are you agreeing to it?" she said. She started crying when I informed her that I simply wanted more information. Considering that I have never successfully carried a kid to term, I asked her if she was aware that a doctor might reject me as a surrogate. She claimed to be aware of this and to have simply sent my brother-in-law and I to a center of excellence, so we could act like a couple. After my successful insemination, I would ask that provider to transfer me to her OB/GYN so that I could continue receiving care. My father stepped in and told me that it was a bad idea to try to become a mother by asking me to do something that a doctor wouldn't approve. He didn't want to take sides, but it was clear that he didn't agree with any of it. My brother-in-law interrupted him by saying, "Don't try to berate my wife with these stupid questions." After he asked her why she felt so uneasy about the thought of a surrogate. "Discuss with your self-centered daughter the reasons for her inability to assist her sister." That changed the atmosphere right away. When my partner called me a B***, he began to yell at me. My father told him that he was not allowed to treat his daughters disrespectfully in his house. Everything simply caught fire. My sister was sobbing and pleading with me to do her this favor. I was afraid and didn't want to die, so I told her that I would switch places with her if we could. That was probably the first time I had ever spoken that out. After that, we were unable to settle any further issues. My brother-in-law lost his temper and refused to apologize, so my dad asked him to leave. As he was leaving, my sister invited me to come chat to her alone on the porch and told him she would meet him in the car. She said she was simply on edge and it had been hectic, and she apologized for her husband calling me a B***tech when we went out. I told her that we needed to work things out and that she shouldn't apologize for him. "You don't get it, you don't understand," she said repeatedly as she urged me to think again. She told me that her in-laws had cruelly joked at one of their recent dinners that she was a murderer, referring to the kid she lost, when I pushed her for further information. She claimed that when she questioned her husband about why he didn't defend her during the joke, he responded that it was true. He made strange remarks about how he was eager to see their child's appearance and that she couldn't make up for it. She suggested that I carry the child, and he was completely on board with the idea since he claimed he would never be able to look into a child and see pieces of both of them. She thought it was her idea, but the way she stated it, it sounded like he sowed the seed. She stated she only wanted my assistance to get things back to normal because she hadn't seen him so enthusiastic since the baby. I tried to tell her that what she was attempting to accomplish was incorrect and that nothing would ever be normal again. She replied she would call me later, but he began honking the horn and hurried her to the car. I am not even willing to donate my eggs so that she might have a child with him, even though I feel like I might lose my sister. I looked into the egg donation procedure as you suggested and wow, it was quite different from what I had anticipated. Her divorcing him is what I want. I will never assist her in having children with that man. I honestly believe that before I ever let her implant his child in me or use my eggs to even conceive a child with him, I would serve as a surrogate for her to become a single mother. I was unaware of how much shame his family was forcing on her. Every time my phone rings, I literally jump at it because I know she will be calling soon and I will have to let her know. I can't and won't do this. Even though I'm afraid I'll lose my sister. I appreciate all of your help, but I probably won't update anymore. Update 2. 1 week later. Although I know I promised to stop updating, a lot has happened, and I can't even begin to describe the strange sense of comfort I get from writing my insanity on this page. Many of you advised me to use greater caution around my brother-in-law out of concern that he would turn violent. I'm kicking myself now for not paying attention. I believed this to be a minor setback and that I knew my family well enough. How incredibly gullible of me. The day after he called me a B***, my sister called me back the next morning, but I was in the shower and missed the call. There was no answer when I called back. Before we arrived at my father's place that evening for football, the day was typical. My sister had just in after kickoff. My dad was asked to step outside and speak with her spouse. Since the game was on and he had the option of waiting until the commercial break or coming in and apologizing like a man in front of everyone who saw him treat me disrespectfully, my dad said no. She inhaled and pointed out that he wasn't being entirely honest. My father became enraged when she attempted to make similarities to a past circumstance. He apologized for failing her as a father and assured her that he didn't train her to be weak and insignificant for a man. He also added that whatever he did led her to believe that this was the way to have a healthy relationship. Without saying another word, she simply rushed out as her eyes began to water. After the game, I had a smashed front passenger window and 2 flat tires when I went outside to my car. After putting 2 extra tires on the automobile and towing it into his garage with his truck, my dad instructed me to take his second car. "Don't worry," he replied. He would fix the car and I could come retrieve it whenever I had time. I said no when he asked if I wanted to spend the night. My sister didn't pick up when I called her. I can't believe this is where we are, I texted her, adding a few more words to keep some of it hidden. It should never be necessary to destroy your family in order to love a man. That's the problem, she said in response. You refuse to assist me in rebuilding my family, which has already been ruined. After that, I tried phoning her again, but she didn't pick up. I saw a car following me on the way home. Upon gaining a clearer perspective, I recognized the vehicle as belonging to my sister's mother-in-law. She has an extremely unique car decal that I have never seen anywhere else, which is the only reason I knew this. In a panic, I called my boyfriend and asked him to come back to my house. The automobile came up behind me as I pulled into my driveway. Fortunately, by the time my brother-in-law exited his mother's car and attempted to approach me, my partner was turning down the street. My boyfriend was shouting at him as he ran out of his car. Jeff began shouting right away. I simply wanted to apologize. I only wanted to say I'm sorry. After a brief altercation with my boyfriend, Jeff returned to his mother's vehicle and drove away. Although it didn't seem deliberate, he did collide with my boyfriend's car throughout the process, and it is still operable. I must admit that after this, I no longer felt quite at home. I haven't actually been home since I packed my bags and left for my boyfriend's house. Even though I know I will eventually have to return, I'm not entirely sure I want to. Even if my dad installed a camera and floodlights to the driveway and back door. Yes, I did contact my sister, but neither that evening nor the next day did she reply in any way. Then I began to see a black automobile following me one day and a red one the next. I know you could say I was frightened and only dreaming, but I would see them begin to follow until I drove in the direction of the police station, as instructed by my dad, and then they would stop as soon as they saw the station. I joined a few pals for breakfast on Sunday to celebrate a friend's impending nuptials and talk about the specifics of the bridal shower. The waiter approached me and informed me that there was an emergency and that my spouse was up front. I walked up to see my brother-in-law, assuming it was my boyfriend, and she was just misinformed. In an attempt to avoid creating a commotion, I walked up to him, spoke softly, and told him to go or I would contact my father. He informed me that he just wanted to apologize because everything had just gotten out of hand. It was odd since we were sort of in the doorway and people were rushing in and saying, "Excuse me." I therefore proposed that we move outside to clear the area. He stated he didn't mean to call me a b***** and apologized when we got outside. I interrupted him when he said that I didn't understand how difficult it was for him, stating that I didn't care since his actions were getting too aggressive and disorderly, not only toward my sister, but toward everyone else as well. He begged me to think again, but he acknowledged that he could understand how I could feel that way. I immediately retreated and urged him to go as he reached for my stomach. I mentioned that my dad's stalking was a problem and that we could arrange a time to speak, or I would call the police. He grabbed a handful of my hair as I was making my way back inside the restaurant and said, "Don't you effing walk away from me." After that, I honestly don't recall much because everything happened so fast and several onlookers became involved. Although he ultimately ran away before the police could reach him, a report was made. Similar to what happened at the restaurant, he attempted to approach my airport terminal 2 days earlier, claiming to be my spouse and informing them of an emergency. He refused to leave and was taken into custody. Naturally, he received bail and has since started sending me the most disgusting messages. After the performance he gave at my employment, my sister did leave him. She has been pleading with me to drop the charges, using her current residence with our father as justification. Despite my actual scalp bleeding from the force with which he pulled my hair and the minor scratches on my arms and neck from when he continued to act aggressively when strangers attempted to assist, she has been certain that he did not hit me at the restaurant. In some of the texts he sends me, he describes the horrible things he will do to me, such as how he will get me pregnant and keep me with him forever. How he knows I am the woman who will give birth to his kid, and how if I don't make things easy for him, we will both pass away before he quits up. Just some extremely alarming things. All of these are coming from different texting applications because I banned his number. When I told the police, they indicated that nothing could be done until he took action because there was no way to verify that it was him. I literally live in constant fear. In addition to the usual safety measures I take, I'm taking even more care now that my boyfriend takes me to work. I have trouble falling asleep. My sister has stopped communicating with me, and I send her a screenshot each time her husband messages me. My dad has urged me to stop because it's hurting her, but I told him that she needed to understand the abuse her husband is causing and that I couldn't believe she stood up for him during some of this. I feel like I've lost. My sister and I may not even be able to recover from this. I feel awful because I feel like I've essentially taken over my boyfriend's life. He hasn't mentioned it, but because I'm afraid, he occasionally has to cut short his usual gym sessions if he needs to pick me up or leave me off when I have to go somewhere else or work. He can do more of his routine when he's gone for a day because of flights, but we're essentially compelled to live together now. I like it, but I don't know if he does. I can't breathe, and I feel like my life is slowly spiraling into lunacy because of the dispute we had the other day about the AC temperature. Update 3. 1 week later. Hello. My brother-in-law is currently stalking me, but I'm not sure where to begin. He wants me to have his child, but I don't want to delve into the specifics. Regretfully, the narrative only becomes more disorganized. The police said that the texts coming in from unknown numbers couldn't be linked to him. So I unblocked him after others advised me to do so. He has messaged me a few times from his real number, stating that we need to speak and reach a consensus. Naturally, I haven't participated. The disgusting texts from odd numbers have persisted. I always feel like someone is following me, but I can't be sure. I feel like a blue car is following me when I go to Dunkin' for coffee. I've really taken a leave of absence from work because I've reached this point. I've moved in with my now fiancé and entirely abandoned my apartment. He was there when I went grocery shopping a few days ago. His hand rubbed my back as he came up behind me. I yelled and leaped to get his attention, and he feigned confusion by raising his hands and saying, "I'm sorry, I'll leave you alone." I'm sorry. The witnesses essentially accepted his apologies on my behalf and sent him on his way because he appeared so sincere. I was literally unable to breathe, speak, or even form words other than "someone help." I was so powerless. My apartment was broken into and left in ruins the next day. I received a strange number the next day with the warning, "It'll only get worse." I'm afraid. Right now my sister lives with my dad, and she is certain that it isn't her husband. He's been in contact with her regarding obtaining a fresh perspective and leaving the state because he feels like he's been unhinged and needs to re-enter, she said, adding that things went too far. I am at a loss as to how to persuade her that he is lying. It appears that the cops won't assist him because he hasn't done anything wrong. For anything to happen, I feel like I need to die or have him seriously damage me. Help me, please. Since I'm in the United States right now, I would appreciate it if you could let me know about any laws that would be of assistance, or encourage the police to be more helpful. I'm having trouble falling asleep, and I'm getting to the point where I don't want to leave my apartment. Help me, please. Update 4. Even though this has been completely crazy, Reddit will always hold a special place in my heart. I will make this as brief as possible. My partner questioned me why I was looking at flats once he learned that I was going to rent one for a short time like a fool. He proposed to me right away after I informed him that I thought he needed his space back. I'm actually engaged right now. Taking over his flat has made me feel much better. Haha. I explained that my brother-in-law was getting out of hand in a post in the advice subreddit. He came up to me at a grocery store, and I didn't do well defending myself there. It wasn't my best moment. He shattered a few items in my kitchen, damaged my bedroom, and broke into my house. He is aware of my passion for my espresso machine and mugs. Yes, cameras were later placed, but I wasn't present. During my leave of absence, I essentially kept hidden away in my fiancé's apartment. Before I received a surprise call, my sister had been ignoring my texts and not interacting with me. She was crying on the phone when I answered. I thought something had happened to our dad, so I asked her what was wrong. She clarified that she knew her husband was following me because she had been monitoring him. She claimed that she was telling me because she had gone to the police, who had informed her that they would send someone to speak with me. We spent 5 hours on the phone. My light bulb went off after the hair-pulling incident and I went into investigative mode, she explained. She claimed that she chose to call the police because she was worried about my safety at that point. She expressed regret for putting me under so much stress. Although she would want to put all the blame on her spouse, she admitted that a small part of her was astonished when I said no. She clarified that she doesn't care about the DNA issue. My brother-in-law was the one who demanded it. All she wanted was for her family to be whole. She will be temporarily living with me at my house until the divorce is finalized and everything has calmed down. They have a prenuptial agreement, so it shouldn't be too difficult, but I'm sure he won't make the divorce simple. A side note. When my father slipped and revealed that my sister's husband had broken into my house, I did learn of it. It seems like she kept the knowledge because she needed to make a decision. He claimed that after she told him, he told her she had no other option and forced her to leave right away. It seems that she didn't fight very hard. I'm not really sure how I feel about this, but my dad stated that he believes she only needed someone to say it to her in order for her to understand. I'm glad she ultimately made the right choice. The following day, the cops arrived at my fiancé's flat. After I gave my statement, They told me that they wanted to have an agent drive an unmarked car around me for a day and that he would be arrested if he followed me. They said that it would happen right away and that I shouldn't panic if I thought I was being followed, but they didn't tell me which automobile was after me. In essence, he was apprehended just 2 hours after I left my fiancé's residence. He was stopped and taken into custody as we drew into the third place where we went on a date. That night at the restaurant, I had more margaritas than I should have. I was informed by the detective that I will receive a call from the DA's office, which I believe will happen tomorrow. Given the way things have gone, I honestly don't think they'll hold him to much, but I do hope that since they have his phone, they will be able to physically verify that he was texting me, which will increase the severity of his sentence. This week, I have my first flight back to work, and I can't wait to resume my regularly planned routine. I had the opportunity to watch the fantastic football games today with my sister, dad, and fiancé. I sincerely hope I never need to edit this again. Many thanks to all of you. Dad wants me back to avoid my grandpa's financial penalty after kicking me out and lying about the rent. At the age of 14, I, F21, lost my mother. I was 17 when my dad got married again. In addition to my stepmother's daughter, F15, they also had a boy, M3, and a tiny girl recently. I've been working since I was 16 in order to save money for personal purchases. When I turned 18, my father told me that although he would still pay for food and other necessities, I was now an adult and should begin paying a symbolic $500 in rent. We argued and I was unhappy, but in the end, I accepted this agreement. Dad told me 7 months ago that I had 2 months to leave because stepmom was expecting a kid and they would need my room. Considering that they both have private offices and that stepmom hasn't had a job since the birth of my baby brother, this was odd. They insisted that I move out though. To be clear, there isn't much drama or conflict between stepmom and me. Who knows, but I don't believe this was an evil stepmom act. I'm actually pretty close to my stepsister. I support her with her schoolwork and help her work through her personal issues. I adore her. To recap, I was at a loss for what to do. I can't afford to live alone because I work part-time and attend college to study civil engineering. In order to find a solution, I called my aunt and asked if I might stay with her for a while, offering to pay the rent. She said I could live with her for free because she was surprised by what my dad was doing, but she also promised to speak with my dad. When Grandpa visited our home the following day, he and Dad had a private discussion. Although I couldn't hear the words, I did hear Dad's irate voice. Grandpa eventually arrived at my room and gave me 3 options. First, I could stay with Dad and stepmom without paying rent. Secondly, I could live with my aunt or with Grandpa and Grandma. Third, Grandpa would pay my rent and other bills while I found a place of my own. He said I could stay with Dad if I wanted to and that I didn't have to make a decision right away. At first, I was happy that I could stay since I believed that everything had been settled. However, Dad and stepmom became openly hostile toward me in the days and weeks that followed, and I felt very uneasy in my own house. Cassie, my stepsister, even saw and inquired as to why they were upset with me. When I finally made the decision to move out, I told Grandpa, who promised to take care of everything. He relocated me into one of his rental apartments a few weeks later. Grandpa purchased me necessities like a stove and refrigerator, and the flat is beautiful. He even gave me a check for $15,000, claiming that it would assist me start living on my own and that I could stay there for as long as I wanted without paying rent as long as I was working or studying. My dad and I haven't spoken much since I moved out. Even though I miss everyone, especially my stepsister, he hasn't come, and I haven't gone to see them either. I'm still hurt though. My stepmom gave birth 2 weeks ago. It was pleasant, if a little odd, to visit them in the hospital. A few days later, Dad called to tell me that I should return home since he and the kids missed me. He went into endless detail about how much he regretted asking me to leave. I promised to give it some thought. I went to see my aunt yesterday and shared what Dad had said with her. With a laugh, my cousin said, "I'm sure he does." I wanted to know what he meant. They then disclosed a great deal of information that I was previously unaware of. It turns out that my aunt's house and Dad's house are actually owned by Grandpa. To ensure that no one in the family would have to worry about necessities like food and housing, Grandpa had formed a similar arrangement with all of his children and some grandchildren. I had called my aunt at the time, and she had called Grandpa, who was upset with Dad for charging me rent in addition to putting me out. Grandpa visited our home that day and sternly reprimanded Dad, even threatening to kick him out. The petty part begins here. Do you recall the $15K that Grandpa gave me? Over time, I paid Dad that much in rent and now Grandpa is forcing him to reimburse me. In addition, Dad is being charged $1,200 by Grandpa to cover the rent loss on the apartment where I currently reside. I may be naive, but I was unaware that Dad wasn't earning much money by himself until recently. We had a lovely home, vacations, and a comfortable lifestyle, but I suppose Grandpa was pitching in behind the scenes. With 3 children living at home, a single source of income, and the additional burden of repaying Grandpa, my cousin believes Dad is currently having financial difficulties. According to my cousin, Dad wants me to return home because he thinks that if I do, Grandpa won't punish me as much. To be honest, I have no idea what to do. Although I've been enjoying living alone for the past 6 months, I still miss them. I miss the life we had before everything happened, and I miss my siblings. But I'm also offended since it appears that money is the true reason he wants me back. First update. Let me make it clear that my grandfather and aunt are from my father's side of the family before I respond to some queries. I don't have a lot of contact with my mother's side. I have uncles and aunts, but they don't live close by, and my maternal grandparents died before Mom did. Even though I get along well with my 2 other uncles on my dad's side, my aunt has always been like a second mother to me, especially since my mother passed away. It was implied that my stepsister would have to begin paying rent when she reached 18, and my stepmother was aware that I was doing so. I don't know though, if she was aware that Dad didn't own the house or how much Grandpa had contributed financially. Monday's update. I called Dad the day following my post to let him know that I had made the decision not to move back. I just explained that I was comfortable where I was and that going back would feel like a step backward, without mentioning anything I had been taught. However, I did mention that I wanted to stay in contact and that they were welcome to have me over for dinner at any time. I also mentioned how much I wanted my stepsister and stepbrother to visit me at home. Dad didn't seem angry, but he did sound disappointed. He concluded by saying, "We'll see," and went on. Although I was also a little let down, he called me on Friday to ask if I would like to join them for lunch on Sunday. We decided to have dinner on Thursday as I indicated that I already had plans with Grandpa and Grandma. Despite the fact that we communicate and chat frequently, I haven't yet told my stepsister about any of this. Although she hasn't heard her parents talking about me, she did say that her maternal grandmother, who is staying over to help with the baby, is incredibly annoying. That made me giggle. I'll try speaking with Dad on Thursday because I didn't want to raise Cassie's expectations only to have him reject my offer of a sleepover. My most significant news is that I recently returned from a visit with Grandpa and Grandma. I told them I wanted to know everything that was happening, but we also had a great day together. I felt as though I had been living in a world of deception, and I was no longer a child. There were a few extra specifics, but the key points were the same as what my cousin and aunt told me last week. Due to Dad's limited savings, Grandpa has been covering many of our essential expenses, such as school, medical care, etc. Grandpa also informed me that prior to her death, he and Mom made the majority of the contributions to my college fund. I feel a little foolish for not recognizing it sooner, but I suppose it makes sense. In order for my stepsister to feel included and have the same possibilities as the rest of her siblings, Grandpa has also established money for them. This man is amazing. I realize how fortunate I am to have him, and I adore him so much. Numerous others have made helpful rather than critical remarks, emphasizing how fortunate I am to have grandparents and other family members who can support me. I'm really appreciative and hope to help others the way they help me in the future. I also shared my concerns about Dad's financial status with Grandpa. He reassured me that Dad would be all right, he would simply need to practice more frugal spending for a bit. Grandpa vowed to never let any of his children or grandchildren to endure hardship or lack basic necessities. He's attempting to teach Dad a lesson that he probably ought to have learned long ago, as many of you have already noted. I have therefore made the decision to keep my distance and not tell Dad that I'm an expert. I think it's best if he keeps believing I'm in the dark, even if several of you suggested that I approach him. Finally, we discussed the reasons behind Dad's expulsion of me. I could see that Dad's actions had hurt both Grandpa and Grandma, but Grandpa also had no response. He claimed that he approached his father for an explanation but received none. I'll continue to make an effort to connect with my siblings outside of my father and stepmother for the time being. Additionally, I'll attempt to schedule weekly dinners with them. Even though I'm aware that most of what you have all stated about my father is accurate, I still want to make an effort to keep in touch with him, if not for his benefit then at least for the benefit of my siblings and me. Don't worry though, I won't allow him to harm me once more. Update from dinner. Last Thursday. A few individuals messaged me to inquire on the dinner's success, but there isn't much else to say. I went there after work on Thursday, and my goodness, I missed my siblings terribly. I stayed with them most of the time. My baby sister is so adorable that I could eat her up, and my baby brother has grown up a lot. No matter what, I never want to be separated from them again. The only person I maintained in frequent communication with via phone calls and texts was my stepsister, Cassie. I unintentionally included her name in my initial post. She is a wonderful lady, and while she is aware that I didn't leave amicably, she is unaware of all the specifics or financial information. She was overjoyed when I asked whether she would want to spend some time at my place for an overnight. She would have started packing right then and there if I hadn't intervened. Guess where my stepmother's mother is staying while she's still there assisting with the baby? In my former room. The baby's room has been converted into a guest room, and because it's closer to the master bedroom, it's now my stepmother's former office. It was a little painful. Her mother continued to monitor me, even though I've only met my stepmother's parents a few times and they've always been kind to me. She was continually watching me, as if she thought I might take anything, regardless of where I went or what I did. She refused to leave my side while I held the infant. In any case, supper went as smoothly as you can imagine except from that. I was happy to see my siblings and play with them for a few hours, even though it was a little weird. I told Cassie at the end of the night that we should have a sleepover that weekend. Absolutely not, her grandmother said right away, but I was surprised when my stepmother intervened. She said I could pick Cassie up for dinner on Saturday after soccer practice if she wanted to. My stepmother gave me a very sincere hug as I was leaving. We've always had a decent relationship. As I stated in my first post, but I kind of came to believe that she's just a bad stepmother because so many people have said it. I felt really emotional and bewildered when I left. In the afternoon of Saturday, I picked Cassie up. She compared shawarma to a pork burrito when we first tasted it after watching Inside Out. There isn't much of a difference. Spending the day with her was wonderful, and I'm thankful that she's in my life. After dropping her off on Sunday, I walked inside to visit my other siblings. Dad was out meeting a friend from work, so he wasn't there. In case you were wondering, my stepmother used to work for an advertising firm but is now a stay-at-home mother, and my dad is a lawyer. On Friday, we have another supper planned. I don't want to bring it up right now, but I'm not sure why Dad wanted me to move out or why he charged me rent. I would prefer not to take the chance of destroying my bond with my siblings. Since things are finally settling down to regular living, I'm not sure whether there will be any more updates. Second update. Things have been quite routine since my last update. The Friday before last, my dad and I had another meal. I chose to ignore stepmom's mother, who I'll call Evie, for evil, even though she was still giving me the evil eye. I was considering taking my younger brother to the park yesterday, and I had planned another supper for last Friday. Dad needed to talk to the entire family, so he called on Wednesday to ask if I could reschedule and go to Grandpa's on Saturday instead. In the interim, Cassie has informed me that my stepmother, I'll refer to her as Shay, and Evie have been having a lot of arguments. Shay's father, who I'll call Libby, short for lying bastard, arrived last Sunday. On Monday, Libby and Evie returned home after what seemed to be a major altercation. I went to Grandpa's yesterday afternoon, and my aunt was there as well. Dad and Shay showed up shortly after with Cassie. Dad apologized to my grandparents and to me, obviously humiliated. Additionally, Shay expressed regret to me and Dad explained the events of the previous few years. Cassie was there for the entire chat, but she didn't know all of it, while I did. Though it may be a little disorganized, I will attempt to explain everything here. Grandpa and a friend founded a business years ago, and it was a huge success. Grandpa sold the business and made a substantial profit when Dad turned 25. He made the decision to give a home to each of his children. With the understanding that they would use it to pay off debts or purchase homes, he gave each of his children $350,000. Grandpa didn't want his children to experience homelessness since he had witnessed it happen to others. But instead of purchasing a house, Dad relocated to New York to establish his own legal firm and grow into a well-known and prosperous attorney. However, things didn't work out so well for him, as you may expect. When he ran out of money and was unable to pay his rent half a decade later, he turned to Grandpa and returned home. Grandpa assisted him in finding employment with a friend. After some time, Dad began to rebuild his life, moved out of Grandpa's house, rented a house, met my mother, and started dating her. After a while, he proposed to her after they fell in love. Grandpa came to them and promised to give them a house before they were married. His other children had already heard about this and approved of it. The house would remain in Grandpa's name and eventually go straight to Dad's children in Grandpa's will though, because he didn't completely trust Dad and he wanted to make sure Dad's future children would always have somewhere to live. I was therefore wrong in the past. Only my dad and two of my cousins reside in the houses that Grandpa owns. My uncles and aunts do not. After that I was born, and for a while, Everything was fine until my mother died. When Dad found it difficult to care for me by himself, Grandpa began to provide financial support. After a few more years, Dad got to know Shay. However, Dad never mentioned any of this to her since he felt ashamed about not owning the house and Grandpa's financial help. Dad was only a mediocrely accomplished lawyer in her eyes. She asked if she could become a full-time stay-at-home mother after they were married and she fell pregnant. Too ashamed to refuse, Dad assured her it was all right. Dad was having even more trouble now that he had 3 children and a stay-at-home wife. Dad's savings were running low, but Grandpa was still assisting. In order for Grandpa to continue helping for the benefit of the children, Dad acknowledged that he partially blamed Shay on Grandpa, suggesting that she was to blame for his financial difficulties. Let's now discuss Shay's parents, Leigh and Evie. They started telling Dad that I was being spoiled, that I would handle money carelessly, and that I had an easy life because they thought he was a successful and affluent lawyer. Leigh would tell Dad stories about how, at my age, he had to pay his father rent and how he did the same with Shay's brother, who pulled himself up by his bootstraps and became successful and independent. It seems that Dad was affected by that attitude. He started to worry that rather than succeeding on my own, I would become reliant on him or, more likely, Grandpa and his wealth. Even though Grandpa had successfully raised 3 of his own 4 children, he began seeking parenting counsel from his in-laws instead of Grandpa because he was afraid I would become like him and want his dad's financial assistance. He told me that he felt humiliated, which seemed to influence a lot of his choices, when I questioned why he didn't speak with Grandpa first. In reality, Leigh came up with the rent notion. According to Dad, his first intention was to save the money and then return it to me. However, Shay was unable to save the money since she had a new child, was unemployed, and had to maintain appearances for her family. Additionally, he misled me at the time by claiming that Grandpa had done it with his children and that it was common for parents to collect rent, a claim I only learned to be untrue 8 months afterward. That fact, however, seemed insignificant at the time given everything else that transpired. I didn't reveal something in my earlier posts because, at the time, I didn't believe it was important. I belong to the LGBTQIA+ group. I've been honest about this, and before my mother died, I told her about it. I don't market it, but this will be important in the future. Anyway, to continue, Leigh starts to confide in Dad. Among other things, Leigh starts recommending that I move out, and Dad starts talking to him about his financial difficulties. Dad initially dismisses the notion. Then Dad begins to worry when Shay gets pregnant again. At that point, Leigh and Evie approach Dad and offer to assist him out, not just by providing financial support but also by having Evie move in with them once the baby is born. Since Evie would be present to assist with the children, Evie even offers to persuade Shay to return to work. However, they stated that I would have to move out in order for this to occur. They said that it was time for me to leave the nest, that the house couldn't hold Evie, and so on. Eventually, they persuaded Dad that my moving out would benefit everyone. Dad didn't share any of this with Shay. He just said that he believed it was best for me and that it looked like a wonderful opportunity given the impending baby. At first, Shay was opposed to it, but she gave in to Dad after he played the I know what's best card. I have to move out, they said. In a recent piece, I explained events from my perspective. Grandpa went to Dad's house that day, and they got into a heated argument, not just between Dad and Grandpa but also between Dad and Shay. At that point, Shay learned that Dad was reliant on Grandpa, had virtually little funds, and did not own the house. At this point, Dad's agreement with her parents remained a secret. After that day, I asked Shay why she was acting so rudely toward me, making me feel uncomfortable and wanting to leave. After looking astonished, she apologized and began to cry, stating that she was upset with Dad and never with me. She was unaware that she was somewhat to blame for my departure. I told her it wasn't her fault and I was crying too. Gentlemen, I believe her, even though I know a lot of you have said negative things about her. And I don't blame you. You can't fake the expression on her face when I informed her I didn't feel welcome. She was merely attempting to give me space, but I'm beginning to believe that she is just as much of a victim of Dad's behavior as I am. To recap the facts, once I moved out, Grandpa stopped providing Dad with financial help and began charging him rent for the house. The one expense he kept covering was Cassie's schooling. Now that everything is public knowledge, Dad and Shay have had to reduce their spending, which includes selling her car and giving up nice meals and snacks. They received some financial assistance from Leigh and Evie, but Shay was already under a lot of stress and was pregnant. It was evident to me that Grandpa shared my real sympathy for her and her ordeal. He probably had no idea how much anguish he was causing her. I don't know how he will handle the house with Dad. Evie moved home with Dad and Shay prior to the baby's birth. Things appeared to get back to normal after Shay gave birth, but with the new baby, Dad began to feel even more bad about what had happened. He contacted me again at that point, as I had informed you. Let's fast forward to my first dinner with them. After I left, Dad and Shay observed that Evie was acting suspiciously. Although they talked about it, nothing came of it. After Shay continued to talk to Dad about her mother, Dad began to share with her the things he discussed with Evie and Lay, including money, raising children, and other subjects. Shay approached her mother after my second dinner, and they got into a heated argument. Evie apparently yelled something like, "I can't believe you're letting that slur back into your home after getting rid of her," during the dispute. It was at that point that Dad finally understood and recognized what a fool he had been. Evie was expelled. They got into another argument when Lay arrived to pick her up. In reality, Dad wanted to pretend nothing had occurred, keep me around, and discreetly mend our relationship, but Shay stood her ground. She demanded that he tell Cassie and the rest of the world about everything, not just to me. Thus we reached the current time. Everyone was crying, including Dad, my aunt, Grandpa, Shay, and Cassie. Grandma simply held me close without saying a word. Dad said there would be no more deceit, no more falsehoods. After Dad and Shay left, I stayed at Grandpa's because I wasn't well enough to drive. I got home this morning, took a long shower and sobbed a lot. Now, I'm composing this to see if it helps me sift through my feelings and make sense of everything. That must be the end of the tale. Right now, I'm not sure what I'm going to do. I feel sorry for Shay and Cassie, sad and enraged. I experience both everything and nothing. Tomorrow, I'll give my therapist a call to see if I can schedule further appointments. Although I've been going every Friday, I doubt I'll be able to wait a full week. Having said that, I guess the person who wagered on evil step-grandmother has won.